Bastian. Chapter 71, Fantasy Night. Hand in hand, Odette strolled through the bustling amusement park, immersed in the festive atmosphere. Her grip on Bastian's hand resembled that of a child on a carefree picnic day. Her gaze lowered to the cotton candy she held, a sweet gift given in place of terror. It felt almost like a dream to Odette as she contemplated taking a bite, yet hesitation held her back. She couldn't bring herself to discard it either, leaving her in an awkward predicament. Odette released a soft, resigned sigh and lifted her gaze to meet Bastian's eyes. Despite the vibrant glow of the colorful lights surrounding them, his expression remained unchanged. He had a certain degree of kindness, yet there was also a hint of detachment. Why was he still keeping her in the dark about his departure? Did he consider their relationship to be inconsequential, not requiring the courtesy of a proper farewell? If that were the case, why was he extending this kindness to her now? The question swirled in Odette's mind, leaving her feeling uncertain and perplexed. As the multitude of questions lingered in their minds, the two of them arrived at the heart of the amusement park. The plaza, adorned with a grand palace-like structure made of steel frames, teemed with a multitude of holidaymakers. Caught off guard, Odette's gaze naturally gravitated towards the spectacle, and a soft gasp of escaped her lips. The electric palace shimmered with an array of colored lights, casting a magical glow upon the surroundings. The melodies from the merry-go-round and the joyful laughter of children blended harmoniously, enhancing the beauty of the autumn night that was gradually enveloping them. Odette came to a halt, captivated by the enchanting panorama before her. It seemed as though she had stepped into a page from a fairy tale, a reward bestowed upon the protagonist who had triumphed over countless trials. It was a chapter at the story's end, where a bright and promising future unfurled, promising a lifetime of joy and contentment. However, her ephemeral daydream was abruptly shattered by the gentle breeze that carried with it the sweet fragrance of cotton candy. In that moment, Odette redirected her gaze to the reality that surrounded her. She glanced down at the cotton candy in her hand and then shifted her attention back to Bastian, their eyes meeting once again. "Bastian," Odette uttered softly, prompting him to turn towards her. His visage bore no discernible expression, yet his eyes held the tenderness as they met her gaze. However, it was difficult to perceive it as a profound intimacy. Bastian Clauswitz was a man of impeccable manners, after all. He was typically courteous and kind, never displaying more than what was deemed appropriate. Odette was well aware that this was merely a facade, a surface-level portrayal of their marriage. It was clear that he approached their union with such a mindset. However, there were moments when the truth broke through. On a spring day, she discovered that the stake he had won in a hidden gambling den belonged to the partner chosen for her in the arranged marriage set by the emperor. A ribbon, originally intended as a symbol of victory, was carelessly discarded in the mud. A heartless hand extended a contract offering a 2-year employment. In the depths of the mountains, a night unfolded with untamed desires, devoid of any reservations. Bastian's raw emotions always had a way of piercing her heart. The truth that had been overshadowed by the peaceful days suddenly resurfaced as she looked at Bastian's composed face. Yet, it was through their combined efforts that the contractual arrangement had progressed relatively smoothly. They both aimed to fulfill the shared objective of successfully completing the contract. There might have been moments of understanding and empathy that blossomed from their time together, but they were as ephemeral as the fleeting illusions created by the cotton candy. Therefore, pondering over such questions seemed futile. Her mind, which had been like a tangled ball of thread, was finally beginning to be sorted out just as she felt something dull hit her shoulder. Odette was pushed to the side as she tried to make her way through the crowd that had gathered to watch the electric palace. She was able to avoid falling because to the support provided by Bastian. Nevertheless, the cotton candy that she missed was already laying on the ground. "Just let it go, Odette. I'll get you another one," Bastian chuckled, gently persuading Odette not to retrieve the dropped cotton candy. His demeanor carried a nurturing tone, akin to soothing a child. "No, it's all right," Odette replied, declining his offer. Odette gazed at the cotton candy, now tainted by footprints, and shook her head, wearing a smile. The ethereal thread of enchantment, resembling a wisp of cloud, had vanished, leaving behind only a crushed lump of sugar. It was a disappointment, yet there was no sense of remorse. With a newfound sense of ease, she turned to face Bastian. Even if Bastian up and moved to the front lines unexpectedly one day, their contract would not be affected in any way. All that is required of her is to come back within the allotted time frame and pay the price. Therefore, All that Odette could do was show humility in the face of any choice and carry out the responsibility that had been assigned to her. "There's quite a crowd here. Let's move to a quieter spot," Odette suggested, leaving behind the shapeless remains of the cotton candy. Her resolve to fully embrace this enchanting night was unwavering. It was her way of reciprocating Bastian's kindness. Middle. Exercise restraint, Theodora cautioned, interrupting Franz as he reached for the final button on his jacket. Startled, he wearily turned his body to face his mother. Theodora Clauswitz sat comfortably in her chair by the fireplace, appearing far from an intruder who had barged into her son's room in the dead of night. "I believe you were recently giving advice to Ella about performing well." Franz attempted to mask the rising irritation in his mind and responded. It had been an incredibly exhausting day, filled with visits to stock exchanges, banks, and countless business partners. He had spent the entire day navigating the bustling Rat's financial district, constantly learning about the workings of the company. However, his father would not give up easy, despite the fact that it appeared as though he was about to get bored of the complicated figures and equations. He dismissed Franz by ranting and raving at the successor, who he deemed to be unacceptable, and using abusive language. "Every day has been a living torment for Jeff ever since that lowly beast stripped him of the right to construct railroads and put an end to his railroad building career. Indeed, it is essential for you to treat Ella kindly. During moments like these, we must hold on to our inner childlike innocence. We need to ensure that Count Klein does not belittle us or harbor any alternative thoughts," Theodora stated as she set her pipe aside and rose from her seat. Franz, with eyes tightly shut, anxiously discarded his jacket and tie onto the bed. The mere mention of his fiancée's name, Ella, now evoked a sense of sickness within him. His mother had claimed that Ella would be the one to uplift and support him, and Franz had believed it. Consequently, he had accepted his engagement to Ella von Klein. Little did he imagine that she would turn out to be such a repulsive, indulged individual. Ella frequently demanded Franz's love and attention, resorting to rushing to his mother and fabricating stories when her desires weren't fulfilled. She carried herself with the dignity and pride befitting a noble family. Franz nonchalantly removed his glasses and watch, settling himself on the edge of the bed as he let out a heavy sigh. Theodora stood right before him, in close proximity. "It appears that there is another woman who requires some restraint," Theodora remarked, her voice soothing as she comforted her son's weary shoulders, her grip gentle as she held his hand. Franz's complexion grew pale as she directed his attention to the lower shelf of the chest of drawers, where Odette's portrait was concealed. "No. You didn't search my room again, did you?" Franz's voice quivered with disbelief. "Since you refuse to speak up, am I not allowed to take any action?" Theodora questioned with a hint of frustration in her voice. "Oh my God, Mother," Franz exclaimed, taken aback by his mother's words. "Thanks to that, I now understand why you became so neglectful of your fiancée all of a sudden. Although it is disheartening to realize that she is, in the end, Bastian's wife," Theodora commented, her tone tinged with disappointment. Despite Franz's astonishment, Theodora maintained her composure, not even raising an eyebrow. "How intimate are you with her?" she inquired calmly, facing Franz directly. An eyebrow arched, Theodora pressed on, determined to elicit a response. "How close are you with her?" Silence hung in the air, stretching uncomfortably. "Hopefully, the muddy water she splashed isn't close enough to stain you," Theodora added, her words filled with subtle implications. Still met with no answer, Theodora's patience wore thin. "Answer me, Franz Clauswitz," she demanded, her voice carrying a mix of frustration and concern. Franz stubbornly maintained his closed lips, his face, once in a blank canvas, now flushed with a hue of crimson, unbeknownst to him. "Could it be that you're the only one experiencing these emotions?" Theodora questioned, her eyebrows furrowing as she observed her son's unsettled gaze. As Franz's eyes darted about in instability, Theodora couldn't help but remark, "To think that my own son was captivated by a mere piece of flesh he sank his teeth into. What an ironic twist of fate," she chuckled and took a seat beside Franz. Now equipped with a general understanding of how to utilize the seemingly providential letter, Theodora had a plan in mind. With the minor issue that had arisen earlier now resolved, the only thing left to do was wait for Bastian's wife to return. "It may seem unlikely, but until this matter is resolved, ensure that you don't even come near that woman," Theodora warned, her voice filled with caution. Franz's eyes, previously clouded and lost, suddenly regained focus as he questioned, "Has something happened to Odette?" his gaze fixated, filled with a desperate intensity. This level of enthusiasm had not been present when discussing his own fiancée. "It's not your concern. Your responsibility is to focus on your job," Theodora retorted firmly. "But, mother," Franz attempted to interject. "She is a valuable pawn in our game." "Don't fret, she won't cause any harm," Theodora assured with a smile, gently grasping her son's hand, which was damp with cold sweat. "For now, put Bastian's wife out of your mind. Concentrate on learning the workings of the company and assist your father in his difficulties. And, of course, fulfill your duties as a loyal fiancé to Ella. What are you contemplating? You are well aware of the kind of person Bastian is. If something goes awry, Odette could be in jeopardy," Theodora expressed her concern. "Franz, you must remain composed. Do you honestly believe now is the opportune moment for you to be consumed by worry for her?" she questioned, trying to bring a sense of calm to the situation. With a sigh, Theodora rose from her seat, observing Franz, who appeared astonishingly feeble. In that moment, he evoked both pity and a sense of pathos. It seemed that all of this stemmed from the influence cast by the woman's son. "You just need to live your life diligently, one step at a time. If things go smoothly, that desirable outcome will naturally be yours, so don't worry," Theodora reassured, her affection for her beloved son still evident in her expression. Bastian was not a naive individual. It was evident that while she could manipulate his wife to their advantage, she couldn't keep such a secret hidden indefinitely. Regardless, Odette was merely a card to be utilized for a temporary period. Even if the truth were to be exposed, it would be handled with finesse. Bastian possessed the skill and ability to manage such situations efficiently. If, by some stroke of luck, Odette were to secure a divorce, there would be no obstacle preventing Theodora from bestowing the child upon Franz as a gift. While the notion that Odette was a woman associated with Bastian held an undertone of unease, when viewed from a different perspective, it amplified her value as a prized possession. Ultimately, it would be Franz who would claim her. "If you desire to have her, demonstrate your worthiness. Understood?" Theodora communicated her request as she firmly grasped her son's shoulders. Franz was taken aback by the revelation, unable to deny its truth. He gazed at Theodora in a state of blank astonishment, then shifted his gaze towards the open window with curtains billowing. In that moment, as their eyes met once more, Theodora sensed a certainty. There was no possibility that this young man would fail in his task. Franz, in various respects, was an estranged child, and such was the nature of blinded love. Middle. Upon reaching the Ferris wheel, they arrived 30 minutes ahead of schedule. Bastian narrowed his eyes, examining his watch intently. "I'm all right," Odette assured. Throughout their time together, Odette persistently echoed the same response as they strolled through the amusement park. Whether it was rides, snacks, puppet shows, or souvenirs, Bastian attempted to offer various things, but the consistent answer remained unchanged. As a result, they aimlessly meandered around the park, and before he realized it, it was time for his appointment. In light of this, Bastian couldn't help but wonder what exactly intrigued her. She was a woman of puzzling complexity. "Would you care to go on a ride?" Bastian asked politely, surprising Odette with his unexpected question. "I'm fine," she replied, offering a polite smile. However, this time, the silence that followed seemed unusually prolonged. Bastian, feeling perplexed, directed his gaze downwards towards Odette, who stood beside him. He noticed her gaze fixed upon the Ferris wheel, her eyes carrying a hint of seriousness. "Will it be finished in 30 minutes? After some time, Odette cautiously turned her head and inquired. It appeared that the reason behind her freshly flushed cheeks was not solely due to the chilly autumn evening. "Perhaps," Bastian responded without hesitation. Although he lacked knowledge about the specific boarding time for the ride, he answered confidently. "As long as you're all right, then yes, let's go," Odette affirmed, her gaze fixed on the Ferris wheel once more, nodding in agreement. Bastian couldn't help but chuckle at the air of elegance displayed by Odette as she gave her consent. In response, a serene smile graced Odette's face as she quietly observed his expression. It was a look that made Bastian feel as though he was witnessing the blossoming of a flower, a truly captivating moment. Instead of providing a verbal response, Bastian chose a different course of action. He reached out and firmly grasped Odette's hand, taking a decisive stride forward. It was a significant step towards their ultimate destination, symbolizing the answer he had finally discovered. "Bastian." Chapter 72, Like That Light. Oh my, I apologize for this, the Ferris wheel manager said with a kind smile as he reached the barrier line, marking the restricted area with a gentle tap. When Odette approached the sign positioned at the center of the chain, the final passenger of the Ferris wheel disembarked. We had to close early today due to an issue with the rotating shaft, which was causing an increasing noise. I decided to shut it down for inspection. I hope you understand, the manager explained hurriedly, making his way towards the machine room. With a quick motion, he pulled down the lever, and a sharp metallic sound resonated through the air, bringing the Ferris wheel to a halt. It's all right, Bastian, Odette said, her expression tinged with disappointment. Though unfortunate, it was nothing out of the ordinary. She preferred not to dwell on things she had to accept, maintaining a resilient spirit that had carried her through thus far. How about something else? Bastian turned around, gesturing with a nod of his chin towards the other side of the amusement park. We could try the merry-go-round, or... Now is the time, I promised Tira, Odette interrupted gently, her smile softening. She reached out and took hold of Bastian's sleeve. I've had plenty of enjoyable moments today, so that's enough. Let's not dwell on it. I'm not accustomed to your intricate way of speaking, Odette, Bastian remarked, his gaze shifting from the static scenery back to Odette. His head tilted, bringing his eyes to meet Odette's level. Are you truly all right? His tone matched his straightforwardness as he asked. Yes, I genuinely mean it, Odette replied, taking a small step back and nodding. Her eyes quivered slightly, yet her voice remained steady and composed. Let's find a bench and rest until Tira arrives. I've been walking quite a bit, and I'm feeling a bit tired. Having deftly concluded their conversation, Odette swiftly departed from the Ferris wheel. She sensed Bastian's gaze upon her back but refrained from turning around. She assumed everything was in order. However, it wasn't until later that she noticed Bastian's absence. Sitting on a bench to catch her breath, Odette scanned her surroundings with a perplexed expression. It seemed they had left the Ferris wheel together, but Bastian had vanished without a trace. Bastian, Odette exclaimed, rising swiftly from the bench. The surroundings were hushed due to the Ferris wheel's cessation of operation, making it implausible for their paths to have diverged. After all, Bastian was the type of person who never failed to notice Odette, even in a crowd. Calling out his name several more times without receiving a response, Odette hastened her steps as she circled the Ferris wheel. Just as she started to entertain the suspicion that he might be playing a mischievous prank, Bastian emerged into view. Odette sighed in exasperation as she sat back down on the bench for a second time. Bastian was walking up to Odette in a casual manner. In one of his hands, he was clutching a cup made of colorful paper. Take it. The item was handed over to Odette, who was present and stood there when Bastian did so. It looked like chocolate, with a cloud of white steam rising. Middle. I'm so sorry, Bastian, Odette said with a tinge of remorse, glancing at her watch before lowering her head. She attributed the delay to her half-sister's failure to arrive at the agreed-upon time. Bastian chuckled softly, observing how many times Odette had found herself in a similar apologetic situation within just 2 days. It sparked his curiosity about the intricate history shared between the two sisters in their past lives. Do you always behave like this? Bastian's eyes narrowed slightly as he lowered his gaze. Odette observed him, still clutching the untouched cocoa in her hands. When your sister faces an accident, you fervently pray. It appears to be a relationship defined by strict roles. I apologize, one saga. I don't need an apology, Odette. Especially not from you. She was swiftly interrupted by Bastian's resolute tone. In spite of the fact that Odette acted as though she were the mother of her half-sister, she was actually simply a young woman who had recently turned 20 years old. Up until this point, Bastian had written it off as merely her foolish and pathetic side. However, now that he has arrived to this point, he has become truly curious. What the hell does this woman's family mean to her if she was willing to devote herself to them with such unquestioning devotion? Regardless, she's your younger half-sister, born from a different stomach. Perhaps the most honorable action taken by Duke Diessen was to refrain from bestowing his surname upon the illegitimate daughter of a maid, don't you think? Bastian voiced his perspective. I understand your viewpoint, and it's not an entirely incorrect opinion. But, Bastian, please refrain from speaking about my family in that manner. After pausing for a moment, Odette cautiously offered her counter-argument. It's not Tira's fault that she was born out of wedlock. It's our father's responsibility and something he should feel ashamed of. Seems like your family's love is solely reserved for your half-sister, isn't it? Because my father chose to abandon his role as my father, Odette whispered softly, a hint of loneliness passing over her lips. She had made great sacrifices to come to terms with this truth, yet Bastian refrained from mentioning the Duke Diessen's name any longer. No matter what anyone says, Tira is my family. And I will never feel ashamed of my family. Will Tira truly love you to that extent? Bastian asked. Even if that's not the case, it's all right, Odette replied, her smile exuding comfort as she turned towards him. I don't desire for Tira's love to be overwhelming to the point of pain. Instead, I wish for her to simply like me. Someone whose heart feels bright and joyous at the mere thought of me. With a serene expression, Odette raised her gaze and fixed her eyes on the Ferris wheel after taking the final sip of cocoa. Despite the ride's cessation, its lights continued to illuminate the night sky, resembling the kind of radiance she sought. Bastian kept his gaze steady on Odette while maintaining a low whisper. The woman who was daydreaming about the bright lights of an amusement park had a serene look on her face, as if the water were calm and still. He was clueless about it. After giving it a great deal of consideration, Bastian was unable to arrive at any other conclusion. Odette's statements were not adequately understood. In addition to that, it was very similar to a foreign language that he had never mastered. By the way, Bastian. A voice as enchanting as the night itself broke through the deepening silence. Odette had a tendency to frequently address her conversational partners by name, a habit Bastian found himself somewhat drawn to avoid acknowledging. I don't believe it's a negative thing that I can't ride the Ferris wheel. Thanks to you, I had the opportunity to admire it from here to my heart's content. It appears even more beautiful up close. Don't you think you're excessively justifying yourself? Bastian retorted, questioning her line of thought. You're welcome. Inside the Ferris wheel, you can't see the Ferris wheel itself. If I had been riding it, I wouldn't have been able to enjoy this beautiful view, Odette replied, turning her head and gracing Bastian with a radiant smile. Thanks to you, I've created wonderful memories. Thank you, Bastian. Let's ride together next time. There's a Ferris wheel like this in Rats as well, Bastian impulsively promised, his words tinged with a sense of bidding a final farewell, stirred by Odette's presence. Odette, who had been gazing at Bastian for a while, responded with a soft, smiling glance instead of providing a verbal answer. Then, with a graceful and effortless motion, she rose from the bench. Her purpose was to discard the empty paper cups, a task she accomplished naturally. However, even after attaining her objective, Odette didn't return. She halted a few steps away from the bench, her gaze fixated on the Ferris wheel with awe. Bastian rose from his seat and approached Odette. She must have sensed his presence, yet she refused to meet his eyes. Growing impatient, Bastian advanced, positioning himself to block her path. Taken aback, Odette turned her head away, but Bastian remained determined. He reached out his hand, gently cupping her face, and looked at her intently. Gone were the surprise and fear that once filled her eyes, replaced now by a gaze that held only him within its depths. Their radiance resembling the serene and crystalline surface of calm waters. She appeared anxious, yet there was no sign of resistance in her expression. Bastian's hand, which had been tenderly grazing her cheek, gently brushed against her quivering red lips. Sister. At that very moment, when the unfamiliar sensation that had stirred within their chests transformed into a lingering sigh, a familiar voice resonated. Startled, Odette hastily retreated from him, taken aback by the sudden interruption. Bastian, choosing to step back at that moment, willingly released his hold on her. As he lowered his gaze to his fingertips, still tingling with the lingering sensation of her soft touch, Odette departed. Her path led her towards Tira, the beloved family member she cherished dearly, despite the delay. Middle. I believe the teachers genuinely like you. But who wouldn't? Their fondness for you has even bolstered my own spirits. See? How high did it soar? It must be taller than the Ferris wheel at the amusement park. Tira's enthusiastic voice resonated across the campus, mingling with the falling autumn leaves. Odette attentively listened to Tira's lively chatter, responding with a warm smile. She knew that Tira tended to exhibit more varied emotions when her feelings were intense. Yet, Odette refrained from pointing it out, understanding that Tira was making an effort to conceal the sadness that lay ahead of their impending separation. Odette's vacation reached its conclusion as she arrived at Gillis Girls' Academy for the parents' event. It was 4 p.m., and she stood in front of the school gate, only 10 minutes away from the time Bastian had informed her earlier that day. "I still can't believe you're here, sister," Tira remarked, a hint of disbelief in her voice. "Even though I saw you every day for 3 consecutive days. Is it because our time together was too short? It feels like a dream." Tira's steps slowed down significantly as she noticed a black car parked outside the school gate. Although she wore a bright smile, her eyes already showed signs of redness. She was a child who shed tears as readily as she laughed. "Take good care of yourself and study diligently, Tira. So when I next meet your homeroom teacher, my pride will soar like a Ferris wheel." Odette halted her steps and gently opened Tira's school uniform jacket, a tender gesture filled with love. "I'm sorry, sister. Even though I love you, it seems challenging," Tira confessed, her expression a mix of a grimace and laughter, on the verge of tears. Odette reached into her purse and retrieved a handkerchief, delicately wiping away Tira's tears. "When we meet again, I'll introduce you to my new family. I'm sure you'll love Marguerite too. You've always wanted a dog, haven't you?" "What good is that? My family is broken apart now," Tira responded, her gaze fixed on the car beyond the school gate, resembling a child who had lost a cherished toy. "If you're going to throw a tantrum like that, you might as well go back," Odette replied calmly, diffusing the tension. Tira quickly realized her outburst and promptly apologized. As Tira's agitated emotions gradually settled, Odette resumed walking, their footsteps creating an echo on the path adorned with fallen leaves. "I'm glad you're doing well." "Thank you, Tira. What is there for you to be thankful for? I'm just a younger sister who doesn't contribute much." "It's me who should be grateful and apologetic," Tira responded, her voice tinged with a mix of emotions. By the time tears welled up in Tira's eyes once again, the two sisters had reached the gate. The driver, recognizing Odette, hastily emerged from the car. "Goodbye, sis. I love you," Tira sobbed as she hugged Odette tightly, her voice filled with tears. "Take care and stay well," Odette bid farewell in a composed tone. "I love you, Tira." A soft sob echoed in the air, but fortunately, Tira seemed unaware of it. After gently disentangling herself from her sister's embrace, Odette approached the waiting car where the driver stood. The sound of Tira's whimpering reached her ears, yet she resisted the urge to look back. Taking a seat next to Bastian, Odette closed the door behind her, and the car began to move. It was not until the driver settled back into the driver's seat and the passing scenery outside the window began to blur that Odette mustered the courage to steal a glance behind her. Tira was still there, waving her hand and crying as if she were Odette's own child. "Odette," Bastian called out, his voice cutting through the moment. The car was now picking up speed, and Bastian gently grasped Odette's chin, redirecting her gaze away from the distant landscape. Momentarily caught off guard by the unexpected gesture, Odette quickly regained her composure. Politely, she gently moved his hand aside and composed herself, straightening her posture. Instead of uttering words of apology, she expressed her remorse through a brief moment of silence. Bastian. Chapter 73, But What If? Odette was taken aback as she received an unexpected invitation from a familiar yet distant place. The name on the invitation, Theodora Clauswitz, puzzled her. She requested Odette's presence at her home for a tea-time meeting sometime during the following week. The simplicity of the reason only added to Odette's confusion. Ever since Theodora and her family reluctantly attended her wedding, there had been no personal communication between them. Considering the strained and perpetual tension between Bastian and his father, this invitation seemed even more perplexing and difficult to comprehend. Odette read the invitation repeatedly, her mind consumed with thoughts, before setting it down on the desk. As she tried to gather her scattered thoughts, Marguerite, who had just awakened from her slumber, approached Odette. The delicate pink lace collar that Odette had crafted to conceal the cruelly shorn patches of fur on Marguerite's body fluttered as she groaned and affectionately scratched against Odette's leg. In the midst of Marguerite's playful antics, Odette found herself momentarily distracted from the weighty matter at hand, and a smile graced her face as she embraced her furry companion. When Odette fed Marguerite pieces of dried meat from the drawer, the soft clinking of teacups being filled resonated in the background, signaling the arrival of their tea. "It looks like Meg enjoyed a satisfying breakfast," Dora commented with a smile. "I didn't give her as much as before," Odette said, recalling her commitment to providing the appropriate portion of snacks. Having finished her piece of meat, Marguerite gazed eagerly at the treat box on the desk, wagging her tail in excitement. Unable to resist the playful temptation, Dora teasingly took the treat box away. I understand your deep affection for Meg, madam, but it won't be long before she becomes a professional house thief, Dora remarked with a touch of humor. I apologize for breaking my promise. It appears you do have a soft spot after all. Perhaps it's time to find a strict nanny, madam, Dora playfully suggested, adding an unusual jest to her words. Odette, a bit slow to grasp the full meaning behind Dora's statement, awkwardly smiled and averted her gaze. I apologize for the presumptuousness, madam, but I feel compelled to bring up the matter of an invitation from the master's family. Dora hesitated as she glanced at the desk, struggling to find the right words. In my humble opinion, I believe you should decline the invitation. However, please remember that this decision ultimately rests with you. Dora, I share the same thoughts as you, Odette acknowledged. Setting Marguerite down gently, she reached for the troublesome invitation once more. Observing how meticulously Dora had chosen her words, Odette sensed that there was a far more intricate tale behind this invitation than initially anticipated. Dora, may I seek your counsel once more? I could use one more piece of advice. As Odette posed her question with caution, Dora nodded, awaiting her inquiry. Yes, madam. Anything. Should I discuss this matter with my husband? Madam, it appears you have the capability to handle it as you see fit. With the approaching festival, it would bring immense honor to the master on that day. There is no need to burden him with unnecessary concerns. Is that so? In that case, I shall stand my ground and decline. That is an excellent decision. The master would not be pleased to hear that name. Dora's eyes lit up with excitement. Her expression revealed her readiness to divulge the intricate history of the Clauswitz family, meticulously prepared to share the details. Thank you, Dora. Your assistance has been invaluable, Odette expressed her gratitude sincerely. She calmly chose to ignore the signal, knowing deep down that she didn't want to uncover whatever secrets Bastian might be hiding through such means. Their relationship was not entangled, and there was no need to needlessly complicate things. With a resolute decision made, Odette reached for a pen and began drafting the letter of refusal. Fortunately, Dora had guided her in the right direction. Now, it's time to prepare for our guests, Dora mentioned, bringing up the next item on the agenda just as Odette sealed the letter. Yes? Oh, yes, I'll take care of it, Odette responded, her gaze flickering slightly as a memory resurfaced. She recalled the appointment she had made with a newspaper journalist for an upcoming interview. The purpose of the interview was to delve deep into the life of Bastian Clauswitz, the central figure of the naval festival, which would be featured in the Empire's leading daily newspaper. Odette was included in the schedule to provide a photograph for the article. A request was made for a photograph featuring the Clauswitz couple, intended for use as propaganda. The prospect of their faces being publicly recognized in such a manner was far from appealing, yet Odette found herself with no alternative. The looming command of the Emperor left her with no room for refusal, and reluctantly, Bastian agreed to comply. It was part of an effort to secure Princess Isabel's national marriage. If you don't feel like it, convince the Emperor, he said. For Odette, it was akin to being informed that she must stand before a camera without any room for objection. Odette concluded as she rose from her seat with a pleasant grin that this, too, was part of her job. It was time for her to take on the role of wife. Middle. The interview unfolded in the grandeur of the guest parlor, a spacious room adorned with tall, expansive windows that showcased the awe-inspiring vista of Ardennes Sea. Bastian, a devoted and honorable soldier of the Empire, effortlessly fulfilled the assigned task. The majority of the reporter's inquiries fell within the anticipated spectrum, and Bastian's responses flowed smoothly, having been reiterated numerous times before. Thank you for your valuable time, Captain. I will now proceed with taking photographs to conclude the interview, the journalist expressed, closing their notebook and extending a polite farewell. Bastian gracefully rose from his seat, responding with a suitable acknowledgement. Odette, who had remained as silent as a shadow, quietly trailed behind him. Bastian swiftly retrieved and put on his gloves before skillfully guiding his wife out onto the balcony, where the photographer patiently awaited their arrival. Odette adorned a white dress that complemented Bastian's uniform, clearly mindful not to overshadow the central figure, yet exuding the grace befitting her role. Odette Clauswitz proved herself to be a devoted wife, a fact that Bastian accepted without any lingering uncertainty. Please take a seat here, ma'am. And Captain, please stand right here, instructed the photographer's assistant, presenting the desired composition for the photograph. Following the instructions, Odette gracefully took her place on the prepared chair, while Bastian positioned himself behind her, assuming a poised stance for the photo. After all the preparations had been completed, the photographer suddenly voiced his dissatisfaction. "This composition doesn't quite seem to be working, especially considering the lieutenant's height. Captain, I apologize for the inconvenience, but would you mind taking a seat instead?" Casting a discerning gaze over the subjects, the photographer proposed an alternative approach. Once again, they dutifully adhered to the photographer's suggestion. Bastian occupied the chair initially prepared for Odette, while Odette positioned herself where Bastian had previously stood. Finally, the photographer nodded in contentment. "Could you both come a bit closer?" the photographer requested, gesturing accordingly. Odette took a step nearer as instructed. The familiar fragrance of her meticulously prepared body, an aroma nurtured each evening, mingled with the gentle sea breeze and tantalized their senses. The radiant light from the pristine, expansive sky was dazzling, and in that very brilliance, Odette herself seemed to emit a radiant glow. Had Bastian chosen to do so, he could have rejected the request. However, Bastian accepted this reality with composure and averted his gaze. The radiant sunlight streaming down from the lofty and cloudless sky was blinding, and Odette, immersed in that luminosity, shone just as brilliantly. The Emperor's desire to utilize a photograph of the affectionate couple, Captain Clauswitz and his wife, as propaganda material for the naval festival was once again communicated through Admiral Demel, as customary. However, this time it came with the condition that Bastian's honor would not be compromised. It was a stark contrast to the past, when he was relentlessly pushed forward without any consideration. With such an honorable excuse at hand, Bastian had the option to decline the interview and photograph. The Emperor held a particular fondness and pride for the North Sea Fleet. No matter how crucial it was to appease Crown Prince Belov, the Emperor would not opt to tarnish the reputation of the hero of the Battle of Trosa. Despite being fully aware of the circumstances, Bastian complied with the request because it was what he desired, a moment captured in a photograph with Odette. As he confronted a resolute conclusion, a subtle tension coursed through Bastian's hand resting on his knee. Odette, who had maintained her gaze straight ahead, finally shifted her eyes toward him. The fleeting surprise in her eyes quickly dissipated, replaced by her graceful smile. "Both of you, look straight ahead," called out the photographer, who had retreated beneath the dark cloth once again. With a sense of duty resurfacing, Bastian averted his gaze from Odette. As the photographer signaled, an assistant stationed at the far end of the balcony swiftly approached, meticulously adjusting the appearance of their uniforms. Ensuring the epaulettes and decorative cords were properly aligned, the assistant then departed, signaling that all preparations had been completed. Bastian fixed his gaze directly at the camera, his determination shining through. There were no plans to preserve any photographs or portraits commemorating this marriage. It had been decided that there was no need to preserve remnants of a contract that spanned only 2 years. But, what if? The flawless facade of his grand plan began to show cracks ever since their marriage. Bastian had made that decision under the assumption that Odette was merely a tool to strike a deal with the Emperor, serving no purpose beyond that. However, if Odette could continue to offer substantial advantages as his wife even beyond that initial arrangement, the narrative would take a different turn. The process of undermining his father was progressing with unexpected speed and ease. If the trajectory remained the same, it appeared feasible to accomplish the objective without the need for a marriage alliance with Levere. While their existing collaboration with the railway company would be implicated, successful completion of the ongoing project would grant them a fair share of the operating rights. Duke Levere, known for his astute calculations, would not hesitate to strike a deal that promised substantial profits without sacrificing his daughter. If such were the circumstances, it wouldn't be entirely unfavorable to carry on with this marriage. With that realization, there seemed to be no reason to decline the photo shoot requested by the Emperor. "Now, this will be the final shot. Ma'am, if you could show a bit more affection and place your hand on the captain's shoulder?" The photographer's call reverberated through the tranquility. Odette complied with the final instruction, her hands gently resting on Bastian's shoulders, their fingers interlaced. The photographer appeared content as he began to count aloud. Upon fulfilling the assigned task, untangling the intricate web of relationships, and the day arriving when they could start afresh, perhaps considering Odette as a genuine wife and building a family wouldn't be so unfavorable. Feeling the warmth transmitted through his shoulder from Odette's touch, Bastian confronted his burgeoning desires. Then, just as his assumptions were being affirmed, a brilliant flash of white light temporarily blinded his vision. Bastian. Chapter 74, Marriage's Proof. The Hero and the Beauty. The photographs of Captain Clauswitz and his wife were accompanied by rather endearing compliments. With a wry smile, Theodora opened today's newspaper. The featured article about this year's naval festival was akin to a tribute to Bastian Clauswitz. The extent to which the Admiralty praised the grandson of a junk dealer as a hero was so disheartening that it caused a pang in her chest. She casually discarded the folded newspaper to the edge of the table where the morning tea was arranged, ensuring that Bastian's photo remained hidden from view. Theodora pondered the possibility of granting her husband's wish to groom Franz into an army officer. However, deep down, she understood that such a pursuit would be futile. Franz was never cut out for a military career, regardless of his father's insistence. Even if he had reluctantly acquiesced to his father's demands, it would only have ended in his eventual inability to endure the path. Theodora acknowledged Franz's wise decision and dismissed her own futile worries by ringing the bell. Within moments, Nancy appeared in response to the summons. "I received a message from Molly," Nancy disclosed, approaching the bed and extending a letter that she had concealed up her sleeve. Theodora accepted it, setting her teacup aside, and read the letter that outlined Odette Clauswitz's meticulously planned schedule for the week. It appeared that the most suitable time for their purpose would be in the afternoon today. "I have great admiration for your niece. If things go as planned, I will always remember her and your contribution," Theodora praised her loyal maid, beaming with a wide smile. The morning sun's radiant rays bathed Nancy, who wore a deeply moved expression on her face. Ever since Theodora received the letter from Duke Diessen, she had kept the curtains open, allowing the sunlight to stream into the room. The sight of the twin mansions standing opposite each other no longer seemed unfavorable. Instead, it ignited her motivation. "Get ready to go out. I'm heading to Rats. We'll leave around noon," Theodora announced as she lazily stretched upon rising from bed, then made her way to the balcony. Odette, Bastian's wife, had declined the invitation, showing her unawareness of Theodora's plans. It was evident that Odette had no knowledge of what Theodora had in mind. As for Molly, it seemed reasonable to trust her innocent demeanor and assume she wasn't playing the role of a double agent. If that was the case, it was time to start taking action. Leaning against the sun-warmed marble balustrade, Theodora took a drag from her cigarette, savoring the smoke as she gazed across the sea. Bastian's wife had made plans to visit Rats this afternoon, specifically to see the Countess of Tree, a relative of theirs. Exhaling a plume of smoke, Theodora's eyes lingered on the mansion in the distance. "If you won't come to me, then I'll come to you," she murmured with a hint of annoyance. The task ahead was bothersome, but Odette Clauswitz warranted such attention. After all, she held significant importance to Theodora, at least for the time being. Middle. Perched on the third floor of the naval headquarters, Admiral Demel's office awaited Bastian's arrival. Ascending the staircase, Bastian reached the top step and discreetly confirmed the envelope tucked securely into his uniform pocket. Within it lay his meticulously filled-out service application, destined for Trosa Island, the front line once more. This task demanded ample time, and it was a decision that had been carefully pondered and deliberated upon. The downfall of his father wouldn't instantaneously restore everything to its rightful place. The aftermath required a substantial amount of time and effort to clean up the mess left behind. As Bastian contemplated how to effectively utilize that time in a profitable venture, a plan had taken shape in his mind. The service application he held in his hands was the optimal choice he had discovered. Bastian's involvement in his grandfather's company extended to devising intricate schemes to ensnare his father. However, the subsequent tasks were efficiently managed by Thomas Muller, a pragmatic individual. It was reasonable to believe that Bastian's absence would not result in any detrimental setbacks. With the envelope securely tucked back into his pocket, Bastian resumed his interrupted stride. The sound of his firm footsteps reverberated through the lengthy corridor. The reason for his extended deliberation stemmed from the demands of the Navy Department's work. The counsel from his peers that serving at the headquarters would prove beneficial to his career carried weight. Bastian's own musings echoed a similar sentiment. Ascending to esteemed ranks was not solely a product of exceptional prowess. Unavoidably, Navigating through the intricacies of politics with limited authority was imperative, and occupying pivotal roles within the headquarters presented a formidable weapon to gain advantage in the fight against his father. By following such calculations, it seemed prudent to remain in this position. Yet his resolve to avoid a lifelong existence as a soldier remained unwavering. Instead, he reasoned that donning the military attire for a period would serve to fortify the honor he had diligently earned thus far. If that were the case, adorning a few more glistening medals, perhaps those befitting a major, would be the perfect finishing touch, enhancing his achievements. And Odette. Bastian couldn't shake off the name that kept echoing in his mind, causing him to slow down as he repeatedly wrote, and rewrote his job application. If she to become my real wife? The mere thought haunted him, lingering in his subconscious. What was once a hazy daydream had now taken on a tangible form, consuming his thoughts regularly. Odette exemplified unwavering dedication and love towards her family, which assured Bastian that she would undoubtedly remain loyal to their new family too. Even if her current feelings towards him were not romantic, Bastian was confident that over time, her affection for him would blossom. Although he wasn't quite familiar with the concept of a harmonious family, he believed he could provide a better family environment for her compared to the Diessen family, who had exploited her throughout her life. Bastian knew he had much to offer as a husband to Odette. He was determined to bestow upon her a life of unparalleled nobility, surpassing that of any aristocrat, and vowed to provide her with the most precious and exquisite things the world had to offer. Whatever her heart desired, he would stop at nothing to acquire it. Above all, he would shield her from any further hardships, ensuring that no more stains tainted her already challenging life. With unwavering conviction, Bastian believed he could embody the role of a devoted husband, a caring father, and the cornerstone of a loving family. It was only a matter of time before their hearts would intertwine, as Odette had never been a woman who would betray his trust. The possibility of attaining such a fulfilling life made him contemplate relinquishing the alliance with Levere. Yet, he acknowledged that this inclination might be nothing more than a fleeting impulse, a delusion fueled by his longing for the woman he desired. However, as he reasoned that time could potentially resolve this predicament, he decisively penned his signature on the service application. It was a resolute choice, devoid of any lingering uncertainties. Bastian reached Admiral Demel's office and took a moment to straighten his posture before lightly tapping on the door. "Come in," the Admiral answered, his voice coming through the closed door as strong and cheerful as always. Middle. Take a look at this. It's wonderful to have such compelling evidence, remarked Countess Trier with a satisfied smile, as she unfolded the newspaper in her hands. Upon laying eyes on the photograph, Odette responded with a soft smile and gently cast her gaze downward. The stirring of a cup, with sugar long dissolved, filled the air, adding to the quietude that enveloped them. "I've always been troubled by the absence of a wedding photograph for the both of you." Whenever the portrait artist was mentioned, he consistently refused. "It almost led me to suspect that your husband was intentionally avoiding any evidence of the marriage." "That's not the case, Bastian. I completely understand and comprehend. Please don't fret." Observing the warmth and affection displayed by your husband, it's evident that the two of you are still immersed in the honeymoon phase, Countess Trier reassured, setting aside the newspaper as she let out a joyful laugh and applauded. If his intentions were malicious, he wouldn't proudly showcase his wife to the entire empire. It appears his feelings for you run even deeper than I had initially perceived. There's no need for you to harbor unnecessary worries any longer. As Countess Trier tightened her grip on the teacup, the delicately crafted sapphire ring glimmered on her wrinkled hand, catching the light. Odette's gaze fixated on the subtle, ethereal blue radiance of the ring. With a practiced smile, she concealed her inner turmoil once more. It was a challenging misconception, one that couldn't be easily clarified or explained. Countess Trier began showering Bastian with effusive praise, a complete reversal from her hesitant demeanor when she reluctantly delivered the news of their marriage. The stark contrast in her attitude was impossible to ignore. Odette gently placed the teaspoon she had been idly playing with, her gaze fixated on her own reflection mirrored in the teacup. Just as Countess Trier had mentioned, Bastian had been meticulous in avoiding any traces of their marriage. Only now did Odette start to grasp the underlying motives behind the excessive acclaim and acknowledgement bestowed upon him. It was a situation that could easily arouse suspicion. Odette couldn't help but feel a tinge of foolishness for not recognizing it sooner. Thankfully, Bastian's foresight had allowed them to quell any doubts that might have arisen, a stroke of good fortune they were fortunate to have. Still no news of a child? Countess Trier's chattering came to an abrupt halt, culminating in a perplexing question. Odette answered the inquiry with a slight nod and cast her eyes downward. No, not yet. Well, both of you are still young and healthy, so there's no need to be hasty. However, do understand the longing in this old woman's heart, yearning to cradle your baby as soon as possible. A child born to such extraordinary parents, imagine the sheer beauty they will possess. Countess Trier shifted her attention back to the picture in the newspaper, providing Odette with a moment to compose herself and arrange her expression. In recent times, discussions about children had been cropping up more frequently, indicating that the topic was drawing near. However, Odette found respite from these awkward inquiries only when Bastian was away on the battlefield. As her thoughts reached this juncture, Odette began to comprehend Bastian's choice to depart from Berg. He proved to be a skilled captain in the journey of their marriage, skillfully charting a course toward their desired destination. His triumph would be her triumph, so all Odette needed to do was place her trust in him and follow his lead. "Excuse me, a letter has been received for Mrs. Clauswitz," announced the maid, presenting a tightly sealed envelope just as Odette had started to regain her smile. Perplexed by the unexpected development, Odette inquired about the origin of the letter, her voice tinged with surprise. The maid nodded emphatically, providing additional details to shed light on the matter. The letter was delivered by a messenger, marked as urgent, which is why it was brought to your current location. There's a message from Lady Ronner, the maid explained. Ronner. Odette silently echoed the unfamiliar name in her thoughts as she carefully opened the envelope. The sight of the opulently adorned golden letter paper caused a sudden tightening in her chest, as if her throat constricted. While there was no explicit indication of the sender's identity, Odette instinctively recognized it. She had encountered this distinct, custom-made letter paper before. Theodora Clauswitz, someone who wasn't bound by blood but regarded as family. A connection beyond mere neighbors, akin to true neighbors. That was who she was. Odette recalled the recent invitation she had received from Theodora, adorned with the same distinct golden pattern. The familiarity of it all resonated deeply within her. "Are you all right, Odette? Did you receive some distressing news?" Countess Trier's concerned question snapped Odette out of her reverie, prompting her to swiftly regain her composure. "No, it's nothing," Odette hurriedly said, gripping the small folded letter tightly in her hands. "It was from the wife of a high-ranking officer whom I know. She mentions an urgent matter to discuss regarding the Navy Festival." Despite her hands trembling from the cold, Odette mustered a convincing smile. Thankfully, Countess Trier nodded without a hint of suspicion. "It's regrettable, but please go ahead. We cannot overlook the preparations for a day that will bring glory to our family." "Thank you for your understanding, Countess." Odette swiftly rose from the tea table, bidding her farewell with politeness. Managing to depart from the parlor without her unsteady legs attracting notice, Odette hurriedly fled from the house of Trier. She no longer possessed the capacity to pay attention to the inquisitive gazes of the household servants. Determined to quell any futile doubts, Odette made the choice to temporarily set them aside. Above all else, her priority was to meet Theodora Clauswitz. With that singular thought guiding her, Odette began running, relying solely on her determination to reach her destination. Bastian. Chapter 75, Do You Love Your Husband? Today, the music store on 12th Ronner Street appeared deserted. Aside from the tired-looking owner seated behind the worn-out display shelves, there were just two customers present. One was a middle-aged woman leisurely browsing through sheet music, while the other was a young lady who seemed out of breath. The speakers filled the space with a vibrant waltz, its melody blending with the shimmering specks of dust suspended in the air. "Why the rush? You still have 10 minutes left," Theodora chuckled, breezing past Odette with a leisurely stroll, seemingly relishing the experience. Sauntering along the aisles adorned with stacks of antiquated music books, Theodora paused when she reached a corner where an abandoned piano sat, obstructing the view. It provided an ideal spot for a private conversation. "I'm not surprised," Theodora said calmly, turning her body to directly face Odette, who had hastily caught up with her. Although Odette appeared disheveled from her hurried arrival, Theodora's gaze, while tranquil, carried an underlying sense of stern restraint. The child displayed remarkable intelligence, leaving no doubt that the first and foremost requirement had been met. "Why did you summon me through such a preposterously threatening letter?" Odette began boldly, taking a deep breath to deliver her opening statement. Theodora nonchalantly shrugged and flipped open a nearby music book. "I came across a letter penned by Duke Diessen himself. It appears that he has regained his complete memory of the day he forgot due to the shock of the accident. How much longer do you intend to perpetuate this falsehood? Are you suggesting that my father personally sent the letter to you? Odette inquired, seeking clarification. Theodora, with a leisurely demeanor, continued browsing through the bookshelves, a smile playing on her lips. Despite Odette's visibly pale complexion, she met Theodora's gaze without hesitation. I suppose that's true, Theodora responded casually. I believe my father has misunderstood something. Is that so? Yes, as you mentioned, my father must have been profoundly affected by the incident that day. It appears that his memories have been greatly distorted as a result. Ah, distorted memories, Theodora remarked. I regret that you recklessly believed the words of a patient who was in a vulnerable state of mind and body. I will give you the benefit of the doubt this time, but I kindly request that you refrain from insulting me and Tira in such a manner again. Furthermore, I hope you will cease prying into my whereabouts. Without displaying any surprise, Theodora appreciated the fact that Odette possessed a bolder side than her appearance suggested. If you have nothing else to add, I shall take my leave, Odette declared, maintaining a composed demeanor. After carefully scanning her surroundings, she bade a polite farewell. Theodora silently observed her departure, a hint of delight sparkling in her eyes. She had initially regarded Odette as a pawn to be cautiously utilized, but this unforeseen turn of events brought her a sense of satisfaction. While a lone woman might not possess the ability to single-handedly bring Bastian down, her involvement could still result in a substantial impact. Even if their plans didn't unfold exactly as intended, they had little to lose. After all, their relationship was far from its best state. If Bastian, upon uncovering his wife's act of betrayal, opted for a divorce, it could potentially be a blessing in disguise. It could serve as an opportunity to swiftly tarnish his painstakingly built reputation. Being cast out from the Emperor's favor would be an ideal outcome, leaving no room for improvement. Wouldn't it be embarrassing to be so confident in front of me? Theodora's low humming voice blended into the music. Her heart felt like it was sinking, but Odette turned around without showing anything. Don't be swayed by her. Mrs. Palmer. As Odette tried to convince herself and took a few steps forward, an unexpected name reached her ears. Does the name ring a bell? The wife of the building caretaker, with whom you resided for 3 years. Your father thought she might be a valuable witness, Theodora's voice echoed with a hint of amusement. Odette stifled a groan, feeling a lump forming in her throat, and abruptly halted her steps. Tira's claim to have seen the caretaker's wife behind the stair railing flashed through Odette's mind. Her own image, dismissed as delusion stemming from fear, followed closely behind. Did Mrs. Palmer really see that? As Odette attempted to recollect her memories of that day, her efforts only served to intensify her confusion. Duke Diessen requested a 3-way meeting, urging the presence of Tira and Mrs. Palmer at the hospital. If his heartless daughter chooses to remain oblivious until the end, I believe it would be fitting to alleviate him of his injustice, Theodora contemplated aloud. If you depart in this manner, I shall consider it a positive indication. Naturally, I will need to discuss this with Bastian. Keep going. I have to keep going. Pressing forward was imperative. Odette compelled herself with unwavering resolve, yet she found herself unable to even twitch a finger. Her father's memories had resurfaced, and there was no longer any denying that fact. Moreover, it appeared that Theodora Clauswitz had become privy to all of those recollections. Tira. Odette leaned against a bookshelf, seeking support for her faltering legs. Her little sister quivered on her trembling lips, and her breath accelerated to a point where concealing it became impossible. It felt as though she was confronting the scorching noon sun, or rather, a darkness so impenetrable that not even an inch could be discerned ahead. Now, it appears we can have a little conversation. Theodora's footsteps, previously resonating in unison, came to a halt behind Odette. Bastian is still unaware, isn't he? That calculating man wouldn't have married a woman harboring such a dangerous secret, would he? Her hand slithered like a water snake, wrapping around Odette's shoulder. An illegitimate daughter who attempted to kill her own father, and an elder sister who became an accomplice to such a half-sister. A father left crippled by the actions of these 2 daughters. And now, the central figure in that incident is the daughter of Princess Helene and the wife of the war hero, Bastian Clauswitz. This is an incredibly amusing situation, don't you think? It would be enough to ignite a scandal that would send the entire empire into a frenzy. The dormant gramophone suddenly resumed playing music, breaking the silence that had enveloped the room. Odette, opening her tightly shut eyes, instinctively shrugged off the uncomfortable grip on her shoulder. As she pivoted to confront Theodora Clauswitz, her mind unexpectedly cleared. If your intention was to create a scandal and besmirch Bastian's reputation, there would have been no need for this summoning and the accompanying threats. Odette looked at Theodora with an unwavering coldness and composure. Tell me what your motive is. I am willing to listen. Before we proceed, allow me to ask you one question. Theodora stated, placing the sheet music down and crossing her arms loosely. The sunlight filtering through the window cast its glow upon Odette, who stood trembling yet upright. Do you truly love your husband? The chilling question reverberated alongside the phonograph's melody. Odette found herself unable to provide a straightforward response. No matter how many times she pressed her lips together, the outcome remained unchanged. The immense chasm between her sense of duty and her genuine feelings seemed insurmountable. Very well, Theodora nodded, as if receiving a gratifying answer. It appears we can now proceed with our business. Middle. Bastian traversed the hallway that linked the bedroom of the couple, his steps slower than usual. The exhaustion he had accumulated seemed to intensify, further exacerbated by the intoxication following his shower. His application for deployment had been submitted successfully. Despite his outward display of disappointment, Admiral Demel, thankfully, did not exhibit further stubbornness. However, Bastian found himself paying the price of being the Admiral's drinking companion until late into the night. As the passage door opened silently, a gentle voice emerged from the shadows. Bastian. Bastian's gaze shifted gradually to the dancing flames of the fireplace, only to discover Odette, whom he presumed to be asleep, standing before him. Oh, Odette. I thought you were already in slumber. Bastian stole a quick glance at the table clock resting on the mantelpiece above the crackling fire. The hour had already struck midnight, typically signaling her deep rest. The silence deepened, punctuated only by the crackling of firewood that filled the air. Bastian patiently waited, but Odette remained unresponsive. Bathed in the warm glow of the fireplace, she fixed her gaze upon him, unbroken and without end. The lace shawl, once resting on the chair's armrest, slipped silently to the floor, unnoticed by her. Staring away from his intended path towards the bed, Bastian changed course and moved closer to the fireplace. Retrieving the fallen shawl, he tenderly extended it to her. Taking a step back, Bastian observed as Odette hastily enveloped herself with the shawl, her pale countenance carrying a subtle flush. It bordered on the comical to witness her assume such a modest, almost nun-like demeanor, yet it was not entirely an inaccurate portrayal. After all, she remained a bride whose marriage had not yet been consummated. Should everything unfold as intended and the contract come to fruition, Odette would find herself transformed into a chaste divorcee. And the subsequent husband would be her inaugural partner. As Bastian's musings reached this juncture, a chuckle inadvertently slipped from his lips. A virgin divorcee. Truly, the world harbors an array of peculiar word pairings. Yet, if he persisted in such frivolous behavior, it appeared he risked turning the reputation of a divorced and emasculated man. This was not a trifling matter, his actions held weight beyond mere thoughtlessness. I believe you've had quite a bit to drink, Bastian, Odette said, tightening the shawl around herself. Bastian smiled and nodded, acknowledging the pitiful nature of his thoughts. They seemed to be the lingering effects of indulging Admiral Demel's desire for excessive drinking. Now, let us retire to bed. Odette advised with genuine concern, as if tending to an ailing person. While the unnecessary worry didn't leave him with a pleasant sensation, it also didn't entirely displease him. Would you like me to accompany you? Why don't you sing me a lullaby as well? Bastian asked playfully. Odette's eyes widened, taken aback by the unexpected request. Though she appeared aloof due to her lack of emotional fluctuations, she possessed an unexpectedly innocent side. Bastian released a gentle sigh, closing the remaining gap with his final stride. Odette, startled, instinctively took a step back, but Bastian's movement to place his hand on her shoulder was swifter. Odette, he uttered her name with a distinct fervor, infusing his voice with passion. Bastian's huge hand that had been hanging onto her shoulder and had now let go covered her face as she struggled to keep her breath under control. She struggled a little, but Bastian's hold was too strong to be overcome by her efforts. Bastian, please don't do that. Before Odette could finish her pleading, Bastian leaned in and gave her a passionate kiss. His breath, which was thick with the smell of alcohol and flowed through their opened lips, took her by surprise and did not give her a time to react. It wasn't a kiss that was aggressive and forceful like the one that came before. Bastian devoured her lips indeliberately before entwining his tongue with hers. His kiss was quite delicate, but it lingered for a very long time. The same thing happened when he gently stroked her cheek with his hand. Odette merely bore the strange experience with a blank expression. It seemed to her that Bastian had become intoxicated because the booze that he consumed. No matter how hard she tried, she was unable to conceal the delicious moans that slipped between their combined lips, which only served to intensify her feelings of embarrassment. The kiss lasted. She had forgotten about that terrifying evening. Odette, fixated on Bastian with a vacant stare, averted her gaze, overcome by an indescribable sensation. However, the memory of his gaze, brimming with an unfamiliar longing, lingered in her thoughts, etched into her consciousness. Why? Her mind lost in contemplation, Bastian approached her once more. Before she could attempt to push him away, his lips gently met her forehead. Odette tried to create distance between herself and Bastian dwindled, but her hands dropped in a gesture of helplessness. Overwhelming confusion overwhelmed her, eroding the remnants of her earlier resolve, leaving behind a persistent question that intertwined hope and despair. Starting from her eyelids and tracing a path across her cheeks, the journey of Bastian's kisses continued until they reached the bridge of her nose, culminating on her lips. Bastian exhaled a soft sigh, parting his lips in anticipation. His hand, cradling the back of her head, tenderly caressed Odette's disheveled locks, much like her own gentle touch when she comforted Marguerite. It was a touch imbued with tenderness and authenticity. Bastian, Odette whispered amid her lips, reddened and moist, infused with a glimmer of hope. From his silent gaze, a comforting warmth radiated, reminiscent of the cozy glow emanating from the fireplace. Is there something that you wanted to say? She nervously raised her hand and grabbed the cuff of Bastian's sleeve as she raised her voice. Bastian. Chapter 76, If Someone Has to Go to Hell. Her dilated pupil, brimming with Bastian's presence, gleamed with a luminosity. Within that gaze lay an emotion akin to trust, distinct from the time when fear and vigilance clouded her eyes. Bastian looked at Odette with tender serenity, his words momentarily held in gentle silence. He had reached a definitive resolution, and now was the opportune moment to convey it to Odette. He was acutely aware of this. But what should he say? Let's go together. He yearned to utter those words that lingered at the tip of his tongue. Situated on the Trosa Islands within the Berg territory, there were dwellings allocated for military families stationed in the Northern Fleet. While it couldn't be equated with the luxurious lifestyle they currently enjoyed, it provided a peaceful and suitable environment where they wouldn't endure hardship. Odette, being no stranger to a life outside the social realm, possessed the adaptability to thrive in such circumstances as well. Perhaps, it could serve as an ideal location for their honeymoon, away from prying eyes and unwanted intrusion. This was precisely why Bastian found himself unable to articulate those words in the end. The choice of bringing Odette to the new assignment felt like a proclamation that their marriage would endure eternally. However, as desire intensified, so did doubts. There was no denying Odette's stunning beauty. Bastian was acutely aware of how effortlessly he could be entranced by a woman of her allure. In fact, it may have already happened. For a while now, emotions had overridden reason whenever he stood in front of her. It would be imprudent to base the trajectory of his entire life on judgments made in such a state. Consequently, opting to proceed alone after their decision might prove beneficial for both of them. No, Bastian hesitated once more, there's nothing. A serene response intertwined with the warm glow that permeated the surrounding darkness. Odette nodded. A sudden soreness tingled in the fingertips where she had released her hold on Bastian's sleeves. Just as she was about to take a step back, Bastian leaned in, capturing her with another kiss. His lips brushed against her cheek, still radiating warmth, but it was merely that, a fleeting warmth. While her father's intoxication often led to verbal abuse and destructive behavior, Bastian, on the other hand, exhibited a gentle and affectionate demeanor when under the influence. Though they resided at opposite ends of the spectrum, they shared the unfortunate commonality of being influenced by alcohol. Ultimately, they were no different in this regard. Accepting this reality, Odette concealed even the remnants of futile hope. Bastian concluded the meaningless drunkenness by planting a light peck on Odette's cheek, akin to a playful jest, as if a bird gently nuzzling its beak. "Could you lull me to sleep?" Bastian playfully quipped, releasing his hold on Odette's hair. "I'm sorry, But you seem a bit too grown for that." Odette cautiously took a step back to create more space between them. Bastian offered a faint smile, nodding as if comprehending her hesitance. He then sighed and turned away, his movements noticeably slowed and muted, as if he had reached the threshold of his intoxication. Bastian stumbled, his movements unsteady, as he traversed the room and tumbled onto the bed, collapsing as if in a free fall. Odette stood by the fireplace, standing watch over him, observing the scene unfold. The man, typically composed with an impenetrable demeanor, drifted into slumber without properly enveloping himself in the covers. Odette approached the bed, tending to her final duty of the day. Dealing with an inebriated individual posed no challenge for her. Her experience in caring for her father had honed her proficiency in this less-than-warm skill. Odette adjusted the lighting in the room, subtly dimming the glow that emanated from the bedside table lamp. She diligently tidied up his scattered slippers, restoring order to the disarray. Straightening Bastian's body on the bed proved to be a more arduous task than anticipated, given his robust and imposing physique, a stark contrast to her father's frame. Holding her breath, Odette worked silently, meticulously covering Bastian's body with the blanket, ensuring he lay flat and comfortably cocooned within its warmth. Yet, to safeguard Tira, she has to betray this very man. Confronting the harsh reality, all traces of hesitation that had lingered within her were now extinguished, leaving her resolute in her decision. Bound by a profound sense of loyalty towards her cherished family, and tethered by a contractual obligation spanning 2 years as an employer. A child, Tira, endowed with little, and a man who possessed abundant wealth and privilege. The decision, once cast, was firmly set in stone, and Odette harbored no desire to reverse the course she had chosen. As she found herself transfixed by the tranquil visage of Bastian, his slumbering countenance captivating her gaze, the resonant chime of a clock striking 1 o'clock reached her ears. With half-closed eyes fluttering open, Odette extinguished the lamp's glow and gracefully rose to her feet. If someone had to descend into the depths of hell, it will be her. Driven by an unwavering resolve to unearth the truth for Tira, Odette made a solemn vow. And now, the time had come for her to bear the weight of those words, unwavering in her determination. Middle. The day started off pretty much the same as any other for Bastian. The alarm went off at the prescribed time, and he got himself cleaned up and ready for work. The only indication of the chaotic night before was the way he occasionally looked over his shoulder in Odette's direction, almost as if he were looking for her. He was clueless about it. The conclusion he reached, in the end, just as pointless as that. Odette sat at a slight distance from the breakfast table, creating a perceptible gap between her and the scene before her. Although no overt signs of discomfort lingered from the events of the previous night, it remained challenging to ascertain her true state of mind. Skilled in concealing her emotions, Odette wears a gentle smile even when she doesn't genuinely desire to do so. Yet, in that moment, Bastian found himself suffocating under the weight of this aspect of her character that he had once admired. It appeared to him as nothing more than a whimsical foolishness. "Are you not inclined to assume the role of an astrologer or fortune-teller today?" Bastian's playful query broke the silence, trying to make a light-hearted tone into the atmosphere. Odette, taken aback by the unexpected question, finally looked up at him. Her eyes betrayed a faint redness, perhaps indicating a lack of sleep. In a gentle observation of him, Odette grasped the spoon delicately, and shortly thereafter, a subtle cracking sound filled the air as she deftly cracked a boiled egg. According to a whimsical horoscope, fortune favors those who steer clear of alcohol. Odette playfully imparted a fabricated prediction, her gaze focused on the fractured eggshell. Prompted by her mischievous remark, Bastian couldn't contain his laughter, his mirthful outburst echoing in the room. It appeared that his tipsy husband's demeanor clashed with the grace and poise befitting an elegant lady like Odette. "In a change of roles, allow me to read your fortune this time." Bastian's laughter subsided as he reached out and took hold of Odette's egg cup. The butler, who had been in the midst of approaching to pour coffee, was caught off guard and froze momentarily in his tracks. With careful precision, Bastian imitated his wife, gently cracking the eggshell. In that moment, he seemed to transform into an entirely different individual, a sight unfamiliar to those who knew him well. Lovis, struggling with the inability to determine an appropriate response, looked in a different direction. The newly bright morning sunlight was accompanied by the sound of someone pouring weak coffee into a cup. After giving the egg a cursory examination for a moment, Bastian's eyes swiftly returned to Odette. "Today, you must be careful of drunkards." Odette's eyes blinked rapidly as she smiled slightly. It was a face expression that lasted for only a split second, yet its residual impact was felt for a considerable amount of time afterward. Odette. Near the end of the breakfast, as the atmosphere grew more relaxed, Bastian's voice impulsively called out her name. Yes, Bastian, please go ahead. Odette placed her water glass down and met his gaze directly. Is there something you want to say? The question Odette had asked to him the previous night suddenly resurfaced in Bastian's mind. It appeared as though her eyes were filled with desperation, as if silently pleading for an answer, yet he found it difficult to trust his intoxicated memories. Did you mention that you were also invited to the Emperor's banquet? Bastian eventually opted for a deflective question, evading the heart of the matter. It felt like a morning where the haze of last night's alcohol still clung to his thoughts. Middle. You are to become Odette's shadow for the time being. With the duty to meticulously observe and report every minute detail, Molly received an additional instruction to keep a close watch on matters related to her father. Having committed the contents of the letter to memory, Molly tossed it into the burning drum barrel, its flames consuming the written words. Unnoticed by the others engrossed in their own tasks, the young maid went about her duties with little notice. Stepping across the yard, bathed in the faint glow of sunlight, Molly made her way back to the mansion, ready to continue her assigned responsibilities. Under the gentle glow of the pale sunlight, Molly made her way across the yard, heading back to the mansion. The morning followed its usual routine, with Molly diligently assisting the lady of the house and tending to Marguerite's meals. After carefully arranging the festival hat and dress that had arrived from Sabine's wardrobe, a long-awaited break finally arrived. A summons came from the madam's study, cutting through the moment of respite. It's the madam's study. I'll leave. Without hesitation, Molly raised her hand. A tinge of regret washed over her as she glanced at the untouched tea in her cup, but she knew there was no time to dwell on such trivial matters. Duty called, and she was ready to respond. Oh, my. If anyone catches sight of you, they might mistake you for the lady of the house herself, the housekeeper chuckled. Molly felt a slight flush of embarrassment, as if her innermost thoughts had been laid bare, but she maintained her composure and showed no signs of being flustered. Madam. Molly hurriedly made her way to the small study, her heart pounding with anticipation. She knocked on the door with a sense of modesty and respect. Come in, Molly, came Odette's serene voice from behind the closed door. After giving a playful pat to the lively puppy that had eagerly approached her, Molly stood before Odette's desk, her expression radiant and cheery. We have another guest arriving this afternoon. Should I inform Dora to adjust the preparations for tea time? Odette asked, looking up from sealing the final letter. Yes, Madam, Molly responded promptly, her voice filled with dutiful respect. Here are the letters to be sent out today. I would be grateful if you could take care of them. Odette handed over the stack of mail. Yes, of course. Is there anything else I can assist you with? Will you please inform Hans that I will be going out tomorrow morning? Molly's eyes lit up with excitement. Are you visiting rats, madam? No, I am going to visit my father. Odette smiled as she organized her pen and ink. I've tried to keep my distance from my father for the sake of my husband, but no matter what, it feels too heartless. It seems that my father has been seriously injured and is lying in a hospital bed. Can't you understand my feelings? Indeed, Molly nodded. Memories of her father, a drunkard who had met his demise due to alcohol, had long faded away. But now, it was time to fabricate a worthy lie to satisfy Odette's expectations. Well, wouldn't it be better for me to come with my husband? What do you think, Molly? So you want to go to the hospital with Master? It would be a nice opportunity to show my father how well our marriage is going. I believe there would be much for the two of them to talk about. Molly's eyes widened in surprise. She may not have been well informed, but involving Bastian Clauswitz in this game or situation didn't strike her as a wise decision. Of course, that would be ideal, but with the naval festival approaching, will Master, who is already so busy, be able to find the time? Fortunately, it appears that he will have some free time tomorrow, Odette reassured, her smile warm as she gently stroked the puppy in her arms. You may leave now. Well done, Molly, Odette praised, her gaze filled with kindness. Molly nodded and quickly left the small study. It seemed that she would have to embark on another swift journey through the forest today. Bastian. Chapter 77, Prey in a Mousetrap. Odette pulled on the reins, directing the horse away from the promenade and onto a side road. The horse, displaying its intelligence, promptly understood the command and turned as instructed. The rhythmic beat of their hooves resonated along the forest path, which was adorned with the rich and lively colors of autumn leaves. As Odette neared the edge of the Black Forest, nestled amidst two grand mansions, their journey came to a pause. "This is the way." Odette's eyes unwaveringly fixed on the somber forest despite the brightness of the day. Theodora Clauswitz possessed an informant within her household, allowing her to meticulously monitor her activities and whereabouts, cunningly laying a trap. During the course of Odette's inquiry, the young maid named Molly emerged as the prime suspect. Molly's humble position as a maid, despite the fact that she played the role of a close observer of the hostess, made it simple for her to keep in touch with the primary family in a covert manner without drawing attention to herself or raising suspicions. Molly, who had just lately started working at the estate, did not have any emotional tie to Bastian, which led Odette to the conclusion that she was the most likely person to do the crime. This was especially true when one considers that Molly had only just recently started working there. With meticulous care, Odette fastened the reins securely to a robust birch tree before venturing into the forest with a sense of confidence. As anticipated, Molly fell into the trap, unable to resist its allure. Overwhelmed by fear, the maid hurriedly fled deeper into the woods. From the vantage point of a balcony that offered a view of both the garden and the forest, Odette maintained a vigilant watch over the unfolding scene. Even in the face of betrayal, Odette remained emotionally unperturbed. The truth was, she had never truly confided her deepest feelings to Molly, despite their seemingly close bond as maid and mistress. Though Odette felt a tinge of shame over Molly's easily deceived nature, she herself remained unaffected. It was all a part of the past. What truly held significance was the future that lay ahead. Molly. "Ah, madam?" Odette stood before her, her gaze fixed upon Molly. The child held the collection of wild flowers delicately in her hands. Molly, hailing from the countryside, harbored a profound love for the forest. Frequently, she faced reprimands from Dora for her habit of exploring the woods whenever an opportunity arose. Having discreetly observed Molly on several occasions, Odette detected a burgeoning fascination in the child for plucking wildflowers. It reminded her of Tira, a cheerful child who would joyfully present flowers to others. Odette, unbeknownst to Molly, always cherished the offerings from her hidden informant. Contemplating the situation at present, she found it quite amusing. "Have you completed your task, Molly?" Odette asked calmly. "I apologize, madam," Molly casually expressed, approaching Odette with a carefree countenance and a genuine smile. Odette mustered her resolve to uncover why Theodora had entrusted such a weighty task to this young girl. "From now on, I will be the one handling all communication between you and your parents." "Yes, madam, if that's what you desire," Molly responded casually, nodding her head. A shiver traveled down her spine, but Odette concealed any visible reaction. "Then return and deliver the message to your master once again. Inform her that Bastian will not interfere. Additionally, let her know that I will provide a definitive answer once I have met with my father," Odette commanded, locking her gaze with Molly's unwavering eyes. Though Molly wasn't thrilled about taking the longer route, she obediently nodded in agreement. "Yes. By the way, madam, this is for you," Molly said, almost turning around, as she offered a bouquet of wildflowers. "Don't you want to accept it?" "Flowers are innocent," Molly sighed, her gaze fixed on the unmoving figure of Odette. Molly shrugged, then tossed the cherished wildflowers onto the roadside. The wind carried the vibrant chrysanthemums, adorning the desolate path in a scattered exhibition. Odette remained silent as she watched Molly's figure fade into the distance, reassured that Molly would not jeopardize the plan. At least one concern had been alleviated. Middle. "It's all right now, my dear. Our family won't fall," Jeff Clauswitz's face glowing with joy after the phone call. It was an expression that Theodora hadn't witnessed since Bastian had deprived him of the rights to the railroad construction. "Has something good happened?" Theodora attempted to mask her anxiety and forced a smile. Franz, who had paused his meal, also looked at his father with an awkward smile on his face. "I have discovered an investment opportunity that can offset our losses. It is a diamond mine with immense potential for extraction," Jeff Clauswitz announced, walking back to his seat at the breakfast table with confidence. "Can we trust this information?" "Absolutely. Several influential investors have already put their money into the mine and achieved significant returns. Her heart is one of them, so there is no need for further verification," Jeff Clauswitz confirmed. "But my dear, let us not be too hasty. In times like these. Why? Could it be that your husband is a fool, falling for a tin mine? Jeff interjected, bursting into laughter. We conducted a thorough investigation on our part as well. Everything checks out. There is no room for doubt. That's reassuring to hear. I'm glad that all our efforts have paid off, Theodora congratulated her husband on his stroke of good luck. Jeff Clauswitz was a stern and uncompromising businessman. Due to his quick temper, he was occasionally susceptible to impulsive judgments. However, he was not foolish enough to fall prey to a futile scam. Rise and shine, Franz. You should hurry and head to work, Jeff declared, devouring the remaining food in one swift motion, then clapping his hands loudly. Franz's plate was still partially full, but he seemed unwilling to indulge his son. The atmosphere was charged with an impending storm, a sense of tension looming in the air. Jeff Clauswitz, filled with impatience, swiftly completed his preparations and departed from the mansion. Franz, faithfully trailing behind his father, followed suit. Theodora bid farewell to her husband and son, maintaining a cheerful countenance for an extended period. It was a brisk autumn morning that transported her back to the days of yore, when she could envision a promising future and bask in happiness, before Bastian exposed her true nature. Bastian. Theodora recollected the name once more as the car carrying her husband and son drove away, disappearing on the opposite side of the mansion's driveway. In her perception, Bastian was akin to a wild beast, moving with calculated precision. He would patiently crouch, waiting for the opportune moment to swiftly strike at the prey's throat. This trait was evident not only in his strategic maneuvers but also in his ability to seize and accumulate wealth. Theodora pondered the lingering possibility of the child's hidden motive. As she entered the mansion's lobby, she prepared herself for the worst-case scenario. She understood that she couldn't dissuade her husband without a well-defined plan. This was not the time for hesitation or solely focusing on her own preservation. Nevertheless, the circumstances appeared suspiciously advantageous, reminiscent of a carefully laid trap. "Madam. Madam." Nancy called out urgently as Theodora prepared to climb the first flight of stairs. The maid scanned the surroundings, then discreetly passed her an envelope hidden under her sleeve before swiftly departing. The envelope contained a letter from Molly, originating from a location beyond the woods. Middle. Maybe I should write a memoir, Duke Diessen entertained the thought, and a glimmer of hope sparked in his eyes. He envisioned narrating the story of his passionate love affair with the imperial princess, the subsequent tragic downfall, and even becoming a victim of his own daughter's crime. If he were to pen this captivating tale, it would undoubtedly become a sensational masterpiece, destined to top the charts of best-selling books. Why had this idea not crossed his mind earlier? He fumed with anger at his own foolishness. Struggling to gather strength, he hastily resumed his seat and frantically rang the call bell. The toll of illness had reduced him to a mere semblance of a living corpse, barely resembling the man he once was. "Hey, caregiver. Caregiver." Duke Diessen called out in a rush, his voice filled with anxiety, towards the tightly shut door of his hospital room. To compound the situation, the previously helpful caregiver had abruptly quit overnight, leaving him to face numerous hardships without a single explanation. Despite managing to find a replacement caregiver, he was dissatisfied with her lack of diligence and incompetence. Never had he envisioned that Odette would persist in treating him with such disdain even after receiving his letter. Overwhelmed by the resentment surging from the depths of his heart, he furiously hurled the pillow onto the floor, followed by a vase and a glass of water from the bedside table. The anger that was once solely directed at Odette now transformed into a sense of unease. Perhaps she had already found a substitute for him. It seemed she had satisfied her needs, especially since she now had a wealthy and influential husband by her side. What if he was unknowingly being poisoned within the confines of this prison-like hospital room, with no mice or birds to bear witness? The all-consuming anxiety engulfed him, prompting him to cry out in agony as he struck his crippled leg. Memories surged back, the pain intensified. This was a tragic outcome triggered by Helene's opposition to the choice of sending Tira to an orphanage. The princess, who had once embraced the maid responsible for seducing her husband and bearing their illegitimate child, now re-emerged as a vindictive force, seeking vengeance. "Are you deliberately ignoring me now? If you don't appear this instant, I will cut all ties with you." Summoning his remaining strength, Duke Diessen reached for the bell string once again. However, before he could ring it, a knock echoed through the room. He abruptly ceased his rattling and turned his head towards the sound. If it were a caregiver or a medical staff member, there would be no need for such formalities. A glimmer of hope flickered within him as he anticipated who stood behind the door. With a sense of astonishment, Duke Diessen's eyes widened as he beheld the lady standing before him, her presence both unexpected and intriguing. Odette? In a state of dazed confusion, he observed the graceful sway of the red hem of her skirt, reminiscent of autumn leaves, as she approached with delicate steps. Odette quietly shut the door behind her, maintaining a composed demeanor that appeared undisturbed by the chaotic state of the hospital room. Bowing politely, Odette exuded an air of serenity, seemingly unaffected by the surrounding chaos. Duke Diessen found himself unable to tear his gaze away from her, his mind swirling with a multitude of thoughts that left him momentarily speechless. He gasped for breath, as if sensing the lingering taste of uncertainty in the air. You dare." Duke Diessen finally managed to find his voice, but Odette, who had paused for a brief moment, resumed her stride. Her eyes held no visible hint of guilt as she maintained unwavering eye contact with him, standing tall and composed. "If your aim was to bring misfortune upon the entire family, then congratulations, you have succeeded." Odette's voice rang out as she stopped a step away from the bed, greeting her father with a single word. Her face, pale and devoid of any emotion, bore an uncanny resemblance to a lifeless wax doll. The lack of vitality in her complexion only served to highlight the cold, gleaming eyes that exuded an eerie aura. Caught off guard by the intensity of the situation, Duke Diessen fought to regain his composure and find his voice, while Odette closed the remaining distance between them. "Why did you do it?" Odette's question pierced the air, the weight of its significance hanging palpably in the silence. Yet, any glimmer of joy that Duke Diessen had initially felt swiftly dissipated upon hearing her words. "Did you truly believe it would benefit you to place that letter in the hands of that person?" Odette inquired, her tone carrying a mix of curiosity and disbelief. "That person? Who did receive the letter I sent you?" Duke Diessen found the question preposterous and responded with genuine sincerity. Bastian. Chapter 78, He bought flowers. "I never sent her any letter. Don't you know that?" Duke Diessen exclaimed, his voice growing louder as he voiced his disagreement. Odette lowered her gaze and met her father's eyes. She seemed fragile, like a troubled child in need of comfort. She wished it was all a lie, but deep down, Odette was already aware. Her father spoke nothing but the truth. Theodora Clauswitz had indeed pilfered her father's letters, and considering all the evidence, this was the only rational conclusion. Odette felt her heart racing erratically, but she hid her anxiety behind a composed demeanor. Taking a deliberate breath, she gathered herself and confronted her father with a calm resolve. "Has there been a recent departure from the hospital staff?" Unexpectedly, one of the caregivers vanished without a trace. His frustration evident in his sigh. "She took the letter. I'm sure?" Duke Diessen vented his anger towards the missing caregiver. Despite having two caregivers working in shifts, there was only one woman entrusted with the responsibility of handling the letters. She possessed remarkable intelligence and a deep knowledge of literature. It seemed there was no need to speculate on the identity of the culprit. While observing the silent Odette, Duke Diessen's expression suddenly transformed, and he erupted into laughter. "This is all about revenge for your sins. So the wicked stepmother, the enemy of the enemy, has exposed the vulnerabilities of 1,000 things. Magnificent. If it is revealed in detail, not only will I remain unharmed, but the entire empire will see the true nature of the celebrated hero. I should have sent her a letter. It was my mistake not to do so." Duke Diessen glared at Odette. "I will make sure that Tira, who has brought me to this state, is undoubtedly sent to prison. As for you, who have become a partner, you will not escape the consequences, so be prepared. And let us not forget that your so-called hero husband. All of you shall descend into hell." "What comes next then? What fate awaits you?" Odette interjected coldly. She had already found herself trapped in a predicament with seemingly no way out. Accepting this harsh reality, the true nature of her surroundings became clearer. Her foremost concern was to silence her father's destructive words. While it wouldn't completely resolve the hopeless situation, it would at least prevent it from escalating further. Thus, Odette resolved to take the most appropriate course of action available to her in the present moment. "I am already half paralyzed. If I were to die, it might not hold much significance, but the circumstances are different for you," Duke Diessen threatened, his eyes darting anxiously. "To avert such misfortunes, it would be wise for you to arrange for my immediate release from this place. If you demonstrate enough sincerity in rectifying your past wrongdoings, who knows? Perhaps I might reconsider my stance. No, father. That will not happen, Odette shook her head. Her father's true motives, which had become clear to her, aligned perfectly with her expectations. The underlying lust driving him eradicated any remaining shreds of pity and guilt that had once plagued her heart like thorns. Bastian is unaware of the truth regarding the incident. If he had known, he would never have married me. Why would an ambitious man on the path to triumph choose to marry a woman burdened with such a troubling secret? You are Diessen, Odette. Are you suggesting that our family is inferior to that of a son of a junk dealer? Yes, I am Odette Diessen, the daughter of a princess who was abandoned for betraying the fallen duke and the empire. I am merely an aristocrat in name, burdened with a father consumed by gambling and alcohol. That is my identity. Odette's resolute words brought a sudden stillness to the hospital room. The present-day Diessen family does not dare to oppose the Clauswitz family. If it weren't for the emperor's intervention, Bastian Clauswitz would never have married me. How can you say that? Duke Diessen's voice wavered with disbelief. That marriage proposal was my final chance at a better life. After your accident, I was overwhelmed by the responsibility of caring for both you, a disabled father, and Sarah. I couldn't burden the man who offered me a lifeline out of pity with the truth. My daughter. Odette, the last shred of pride for the Diessen family. Are you implying that you've stooped so low as to become a prostitute to the grandson of a junk dealer? Duke Diessen's face contorted with a profound sense of humiliation. Odette couldn't suppress a soft laugh, her heart filled with a blend of sympathy and sadness for her father's pride that he had yet to let go of. Now I can't even be a prostitute. Thanks to my father, I am forever tainted. With vacant eyes, she stared on the autumn forest beyond the window of the hospital room. She wanted to be a good wife, even if it meant adhering to the boundaries of their arrangement. Odette had earnestly worked towards fulfilling her assigned role, hoping that the 2 years she spent with Bastian would be cherished memories. However, at this moment, everything felt utterly devoid of purpose. Please remain quiet, father. Live as if you were dead. Odette looked at her father, but her eyes was devoid of any emotional response. Despite Duke Diessen's furious struggles and screams, her composure remained unshaken. Is it not sufficient that you've made me into this? And now you dare to threaten me? Duke Diessen exclaimed. Should this become known, Bastian will leave me. Consequently, he will no longer be obliged to cover your medical expenses. If I can escape this place, it would be for the best. Duke Diessen declared. Well, then. Once Tira is imprisoned and I am punished as her accomplice, who will look after you? Do you truly believe there are any remaining options for you? Father, please bear in mind that once the truth about the accident emerges, you will find yourself homeless. If fortune favors you, you may even end up in the workhouse, Odette conveyed with a soft voice that contrasted with her youthful visage, delivering a bone-chilling warning. Duke Diessen, now partially dazed, let out a pained groan. Even if Tira was the one who pushed you, what does it matter? Your memories have all returned, but why did you erase the fact that it happened because you attacked the child to steal the money? Odette. This is always how you are. I've known it all along and always tolerated it, but not anymore. Odette took a deep breath as she reached for the overcoat hanging on the back of the chair. In the midst of the chaotic situation, she found herself reminiscing about the good old days, the idyllic moments when her father had been a caring presence, and they were a loving family. Yet, she realized that clinging onto those memories had been holding her back. She understood that the time had come to release them and bid a bittersweet farewell to those cherished moments. It was an act of self-defense and a mistake. Father, throughout Tira's entire life, you have denied her existence and treated her poorly. You have no right to pass judgment on what is right or wrong. Odette spoke earnestly, her eyes reflecting a deep loneliness that resembled the melancholy of autumn. This is the delicate line I am managing to walk somehow. Take one more step, and all three of us will plummet off the cliff. Her eyes had now turned so red that even the shade of her hat couldn't conceal it. I implore you, for the sake of my mother who watches over us from heaven, please hold on to your last shreds of dignity and humanity, father. Odette brought her palms together and lowered her head as she clenched her fists. After being eerily calm during what seemed like an eternity, the hospital room soon started to quake with bloody howls. Middle. Impulsively, Bastian found himself purchasing flowers. His gaze narrowed as he observed the bouquet being packed by the cheerful flower shop owner, who hummed a tune. It was the day when Mrs. Gross and Dr. Kramer were to be invited to Ardennes. This decision was made in anticipation of his imminent departure after the festival. Thus, Bastian felt compelled to arrange a final meal together, a place where they could share one last gathering. Whenever he visited his aunt, Bastian would always seek out a special place to find flowers as a gift for Maria, who had a fondness for them. Today was no exception. As he perused the shop, his eyes unexpectedly fell upon a familiar sight, the very same flower that Odette had discovered near the valley stream last summer. Bastian immediately recognized it. While memories of other wildflowers had faded over time, this particular flower remained vivid in his mind, for it bore a striking resemblance to her. "Your wife must possess remarkable nobility and beauty," the owner, with considerable experience in the floral trade, said. He placed the first bouquet adorned with exquisite packaging, picked up the next one, a surprise gift for Odette. "I have been in this business for a while, yet you are the first gentleman to select an iris, symbolizing resemblance to his wife. Most people tend to favor roses or lilies." With evident curiosity, the flower shop owner fixed their gaze upon Bastian. In that moment, it dawned on Bastian that he had made an error, a realization that came a little too late. "Wouldn't it be lovely if we could have arranged the flowers in a more elegant manner, especially considering her youthful charm?" The primary problem arose when the owner received the request to include a bouquet of irises. "Oh, it's fine," Bastian replied, though it would have been more fitting if the owner had fulfilled the request earlier. "This particular flower bears a resemblance to your wife. I'm certain she will love it," the owner offered, attempting to justify their earlier oversight with a somewhat feeble remark. Faced with this unsatisfactory response, Bastian had no choice but to manage the frustrating situation at hand. Iris. Bastian contemplated the name of the flower he had just been introduced to. As the owner had mentioned, the iris was indeed an elegant and visually striking bloom. "Very well, sir. The task is now complete," the owner said, showcasing their astute problem-solving skills and efficiently packaging the flowers for Odette. After completing the transaction, Bastian hurriedly exited the store. The city center teemed with bustling crowds, and all eyes turned to the resolute figure of an officer striding along the main street, clutching a bag brimming with flowers. Navigating his way through the throngs of people, Bastian was solely focused on the innocuous nature of the floral arrangement. As he reached the spot where he had parked his car, the street lamps illuminated the surroundings, serving as a poignant reminder that the season of short daylight hours had arrived. With care, he placed the bouquet on the passenger seat before settling into the car himself. A feeling of irreversibility washed over him, as if he had engaged in an ultimately futile endeavor. After all, weren't flowers a customary and unremarkable gift? Bastian ceased his contemplation and ignited the engine, shifting his focus to the task at hand. Presenting flowers to his aunt held no particular significance, especially considering that Odette's bouquet appeared minuscule and unassuming compared to Mrs. Gross's grand arrangement. It almost seemed fitting, as if it were an apt addition to the existing collection. Having swiftly adjusted the arrangement of the meticulously tied ribbon, courtesy of the owner, Bastian wasted no time and promptly set the car in motion. The city embraced an air of tranquil obscurity on this early autumn night, cloaked in a serene darkness that enveloped the surroundings. Bastian. Chapter 79, If You Don't Give Sincerity. Maria Gross's eyes widened in awe, for in that fleeting moment, it seemed as if heaven and earth had unveiled their secrets before her very eyes. Glancing at the young Bastian, her astonishment mirrored the expression on Dr. Kramer's face, seated right beside her. With work delaying his arrival, Bastian eventually entered the house, greeted by a room filled with guests. Clutched in his hand was a stunning bouquet. Yet, the enchantment quickly waned as Maria's jaw dropped upon spotting another bouquet he had secretly crafted for his wife. In a quick glimpse, Odette's bouquet seemed noticeably smaller and simpler compared to Maria's, a deliberate choice by a thoughtful nephew determined to cast his aunt as the day's protagonist. However, Maria immediately sensed the genuine sincerity within the modest bunch of irises that Bastian presented to his wife. Just as what men would usually do, her nephew selected a bouquet from the array of options, a lovely prearranged creation adorned with a harmonious blend of widely cherished flower types, similar to the one he had presented to her moments ago. However, it was evident that the irises he bestowed upon his wife had been carefully chosen by his own hands. While not an exceedingly rare bloom, it stood apart from the ordinary. Maria would confidently wager that no sensible florist would include irises in a gentleman's floral order unless expressly instructed to do so. Maria couldn't help but burst into laughter, finding the situation hard to believe. From the moment Bastian handed the bouquet of irises to his wife, his gaze never wavered, remaining fixated on his wife's every move. Even the tiniest gesture or fleeting glance from Odette received his unwavering attention. He appeared like a lovesick teenager experiencing the thrill of first love. On the other hand, Maria was equally astounded by Odette's ability to maintain her proper manners while being intensely stared. "I didn't expect that Bastian would become such a pathetic husband," Dr. Kramer whispered, and Maria only responded with a faint smile. "Supper is served. Kindly go to the dining room." Just as the butler arrived, Bastian finally turned his gaze away from his wife and approached Maria with a calm demeanor, ready to accompany her. "Allow me to lead the way, Mrs. Gross," he said with a relaxed smile. It was the familiar countenance of Bastian Clauswitz that Maria recognized, displaying a blend of subtle determination and playful mischief, rendering him all the more captivating. "Maybe it was an illusion stemming from my aging eyes," Maria reassured herself, grasping her nephew's hand. If Bastian was still unaware, it was best to keep it that way. He had the face of a man deeply smitten with love. Woe was in love. Middle. Middle. The dinner was an absolute delight, with delectable cuisine and meticulously crafted drinks. A harmonious blend of heartfelt conversations and laughter filled the air, creating a welcoming atmosphere. As the final main course was whisked away from the table, Odette couldn't help but release a breath of relief. This extraordinary feast had been prepared amidst chaos, and without the aid of skilled servants, she wouldn't have achieved such culinary perfection. She drank cold water to awaken her ever-fading consciousness. After meeting her father, she found it difficult to think properly, to the point she couldn't even quite remember how she got back to the Ardennes. The events of a few hours ago seemed distant, almost like a distant memory. "Wake up." Odette repeated her mantra countless times during the dinner to brace herself. She pushed through the tasteless food, hoping to hold on a bit longer with a kind smile. However, as the dessert was served, the ensuing conversation trapped her in a difficult position. "It's truly a shame that such amiable newlyweds must endure 2 years of separation. Why not consider accompanying your husband to his new assignment, Mrs. Clauswitz?" Dr. Kramer inquired. Odette grasped the meaning of the question with a delayed realization, her expression filled with confusion as she scanned the surroundings. She hoped that someone would also show a surprised reaction, but such a wish did not come true. Everyone sitting around the table seemed to already know about Bastian's plan, except for one person, his wife, Odette Clauswitz. "But you wouldn't be able to stay with Bastian during his training regardless. It wouldn't be much different from staying here." Maria Gross looked at Bastian and raised an objection. Odette managed to muster a smile. "Don't worry, I'll make every effort not to raise any suspicions," she reassured, remembering the promise she had made to Bastian. "I believe it's far preferable for you to stay here rather than living alone, awaiting your husband in an unfamiliar place. The Trosa Islands can be quite desolate, posing challenges for a young woman like yourself, isn't that so, Odette?" Odette obediently nodded. "Yes, I would prefer to remain in Ardennes. I don't wish to burden my husband, and moreover, there is still much work in the mansion that requires my attention." "Your mindset is commendable, Odette. It would indeed be challenging for the hostess to depart when the foundation of the new household has not yet been established." "What are your thoughts, Bastian?" Dr. Kramer, seemingly persistent, posed the question once more. Odette glanced at Bastian with a hint of tension, her well-proportioned face cast in shadows by the soft glow of the elegant candlesticks. "Bastian?" With a smile, Bastian raised his glass, drawing the attention of those present. "I will honor my wife's wishes," he declared, taking a sip of wine to wet his lips. He fixed a calm gaze upon Odette, reminiscent of the moment when he had shared the news of the war with her. "Thank you, Bastian," Odette expressed, bringing a conclusion to the tense conversation. If she hadn't been sincere, he wouldn't have been hurt. The betrayal of his deceitful wife wouldn't stain his heart. Odette was glad that her intentions were nothing more than that. Once again, she chose to appreciate this fact, which proved to be the right decision. Middle. As Molly entered the bedroom, carefully holding a vase of irises, Odette kept a watchful eye on the child's movements through the vanity mirror. Mindful of the head maid, Dora, who was preoccupied with combing her hair, Odette made sure to be cautious in her actions, to avoid arousing suspicion. However, something was amiss. Just as the head maid, Dora, set down the comb, Molly's behavior took a peculiar turn. Locking eyes with Odette through the mirror, The child furrowed her eyebrows, seemingly signaling something. Without wasting a moment, Molly discreetly slipped a note concealed in her sleeve and cleverly placed it beneath the vase. Catching Odette's brief glance, Molly smiled brightly. Her expression stirred a pang of regret within Odette, reminding her of the past when she had believed Molly and Tyr to be alike. "Have a pleasant evening, madam." Dora concluded her tasks and bid a polite farewell before departing alongside Molly. As their footsteps faded into the distance, Odette rose from her seat. With haste, she grasped the vase and discovered a neatly folded note resting beneath it. Her heart raced, a flurry of anticipation coursing through her, as she fought to steady herself before unfurling the note with hands that trembled. But the air of suspense surrounding her was shattered by the jarring intrusion of abrupt footsteps echoing through the passageway, linking the two-bedroom. Odette quickly hid the note within the pocket of her gown. Moments later, the door swung open, leaving her with little opportunity to reposition herself. She anxiously shifted her focus to the irises in the vase. With delicate touches, Odette pretended to admire the petals, acting as though everything was perfectly normal. "Odette," Bastian called out, pausing briefly at the door before entering the bedroom. "Oh, the flowers are absolutely lovely," she exclaimed with a warm smile, lightly caressing the petals. Meanwhile, Bastian stood by his wife, arms casually folded, watching the flower. "I don't mind, Bastian. I understand you," Odette suddenly said. "Understand?" Bastian let out a laugh, though inwardly he felt a sense of discomfort. The unexpected announcement of his imminent departure unsettled him. It made him question whether it would seem as if he were deceiving Odette. He pondered over the right words to dispel any misunderstandings that may have arisen. These thoughts had been swirling in his mind since the incident caused by the talkative Dr. Kramer until the present moment. However, she assured him that she understood. Her understanding brought a sense of relief to him, as her response aligned with his expectations. Yet, inexplicably, a feeling of unease lingered within him seeing Odette's overly plain attitude. "If you were worried that I would insist on going with you, you don't have to worry about that, Bastian. I'll wait here if that is what you want," Odette said. Bastian, unable to find a suitable response, remained silent. "There are not many days left to spend together. I don't want to ruin the rest of the time with things that have already happened," Odette murmured softly as she continued to toy with the flower petals. "So Bastian, I'm fine." She chuckled, though her eyes betrayed the shimmer of tears she held back. "I hope you're okay too. Let's go together." Bastian found himself clenching his empty fists repeatedly to bear the weight of the words that welled up within him. "Bastian, you must be tired. Go and sleep first. How about you?" "I'll rest soon, after spending more time admiring these flowers," she replied, catching him off guard. Bastian couldn't help but let out a helpless laugh. A woman who found joy in the simple beauty of a few flowers. He had conflicting feelings about her. It both pleased and irritated him at the same time. Bastian discreetly turned away, hiding the emotions that swirled within him. With each passing moment, the bedroom dimmed as the lights extinguished, intensifying the glow emanating from the crackling fireplace. Bidding farewell to the bedside lamp, Bastian settled himself on the bed. Odette remained motionless for an extended duration, waiting patiently until Bastian succumbed to sleep. Seizing the opportunity, she cautiously unraveled the concealed note, unveiling its secrets in the depths of the abyss-like night. As her gaze fell upon Theodora Clauswitz's commanding words, an icy chill crept into her thoughts, causing her mind to momentarily freeze, leaving her in a bewildered state. The mine. Clutching the word in her mind, Odette cast the crumpled note into the hungry flames of the fireplace. The answer that she was supposed to give after meeting her father had already been decided. Bastian. Chapter 80, Recoverable Damages. A knock sounded at the study door. Bastian briefly paused his call, turning his head while gripping the phone's transmitter. The clock on the desk indicated it was 11 o'clock, the usual time for weekend morning tea. "Come in," he responded, quickly picking up the handset again. "Apologies. Please continue." After politely requesting the conversation to proceed, he leaned back against the edge of the desk, granting him a panoramic view of the window, the sea, and his father's realm beyond. Unperturbed by the slowly opening door, Bastian stayed fully absorbed in Thomas Muller's report. The clouds cleared, revealing brilliant sunlight reflecting on the sea's surface, and momentarily blinding him. Amidst that blissful sight, he listened to the long-awaited news: his father had finally fallen into his trap. Despite the prolonged search, he took the bait instantly. Now, Bastian only needed to tighten the grip and ensure his father couldn't escape. With Theodora Clauswitz as the sole remaining variable, Bastian harbored little worry. Her fatal flaw was her unwavering love for her husband, leading her to endure absurdity and enabling his father's foolish dictatorship for years. "We'll still keep an eye on it," Bastian calmly said as he leisurely opened the lid of the cigarette box placed next to the file folder. Allowing his father to bask in a false sense of triumph, reaching a point of no return, proved to be the optimal strategy, though it was akin to a deceptive bluff, contrary to heroic psychology. Jeff Clauswitz was among those who dedicate their entire lives to a singular goal. In light of this, Bastian wanted to express a small token of appreciation for his father's final journey. "Let's exercise patience and continue preparing for our next move," Bastian instructed calmly. Knowing one mine wouldn't be enough to bring his father down, he had set up a domino-like plan. The mine served as the initial trigger, setting off a sequence of subsequent traps. If they succeeded in toppling him, it would mean fulfilling his late grandfather's task. The phone call concluded with scheduling coordination for the upcoming board meeting next week. Bastian set down the warm receiver and turned around, cigarette in hand, searching for a lighter. However, to his surprise, he was met with an unexpected face, Odette. Odette stood in front of him, resembling a porcelain doll, and placed a tea tray at the desk's edge. "I came on behalf of Lovis." She spoke with a gentle smile, lifting the teapot. The aroma of brewed tea filled the room, mingling with the rising steam in the serene silence. She put a teacup beside the spread-out documents. The midday sunlight streamed through the window, casting a glow upon her face. "Did I break an etiquette rule?" she asked, her eyes shimmering with a captivating brilliance akin to the sparkling sea on a sunny day. Bastian settled in front of the desk, holding the teacup she served, while the unlit cigarette and lighter sat untouched next to the pen stand. Middle. 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 The pen scratching ceased, plunging the room into a stifling silence. Odette sighed silently, taking in the study's opulent surroundings. The walls were lined with grand bookshelves, brimming with an extensive collection. The furniture and decor exuded an overwhelming grandeur, making it challenging to concentrate on any one item. Resisting the urge to get up, she reached for an unread book and reopened it. Yet, her senses remained wholly attuned to Bastian. The mahogany desk stood commanding in front of the fireplace, positioned to observe his every move and gauge Odette's actions as well. Bastian held a list of investors and documents regarding the diamond mine, all meeting Theodora's specific and explicit demands. The deadline loomed before the naval festival. While minor updates and progress reports could be conveyed through Molly, important documents were to be delivered directly. Odette's unheard objection to the tight schedule would undoubtedly harm her. With guilty eyes, she glanced at Bastian, who finished reviewing one document before unfolding the next. His unwavering focus on the task erased her presence in their shared space. Bastian led an incredibly busy life, juggling naval duties on weekdays and managing his late grandfather's business during evenings and weekends. His life operated like meshing of two gears, continuously turning without gaps. Odette suspected that the conflicts over the family estate played a role. She may not have known much about the business, but she had a vague understanding of Theodora Clauswitz's intentions in involving her as a spy. Bastian's quest for revenge seemed evident. His father had forsaken their ancestral home and even distanced himself from his own son in pursuit of marrying a noble woman. He became a deserving target of his hatred and a potential object of his revenge. Odette squeezed her eyes shut, taking deep breaths to steady her trembling hands gripping the table's edge. A doubt crept into her heart. Failure was not an option if she wanted to protect Tara. Odette raised her gaze to meet Bastian's as he lit his cigarette, his attention shifting towards her. A tranquil haze enveloped their gaze, marked by the trailing smoke. Odette gracefully masked her unease with a subtle smile. Bastian wordlessly flicked the ashes, and turned his attention to the document before him. "Wake." Odette repeated the order to herself relentlessly. She had to protect Tara, even if it meant hurting Bastian. A scandal would ruin the reputation of a war hero. Whether Bastian knew or not, the consequences were dire. He would be labeled as a foolish if ignorant, an accomplice if aware. Even if Tara escaped punishment, the investigation would still shatter her life. Though Bastian's revenge against his father was incomplete, yet his wealth remained secure. But, a tarnished reputation can never be restored. Odette didn't want to strip away the hard-earned reputation of a man who fought to transcend his social status. It was better for him to endure a recoverable financial loss instead. With determination, Odette unfastened the brooch from her shawl while Bastian remained engrossed in signing the documents. Calculating the timing, she discreetly tucked the brooch into the crevice between the sofa cushions and armrest. Her motive was clear: she needed a valid reason to enter Bastian's study alone. As Bastian's attention returned to the sofa, Odette skillfully concealed the brooch and relied on her smile as a shield. Bastian observed Odette and resumed smoking without speaking. Could he be suspicious? As Odette endured his gaze, a sense of powerlessness washed over her. She couldn't shake off the growing unease within her chest. Suddenly, the faint scratching and whimpering of a puppy behind the door reached her ears. Bastian narrowed his eyes at the study door. Odette longed for an opportunity to escape, but Marguerite's pitiful whining heightened her distress. Just as she was about to leave, Bastian rose from his desk and strode across the study. He swung the door open, startling Marguerite, who let out a frantic bark. "Sorry, Bastian." Odette quickly apologized and stood up. As she prepared to leave with Marguerite, Bastian surprised her by stepping back, allowing the dog to enter the study. Marguerite eagerly took the chance and dashed inside. Bastian casually closed the door and resumed his place at the desk as if nothing had happened. Bewildered, Odette hugged Marguerite tightly, while Bastian, sitting upright, redirected his attention back to the documents before him. "You can't do that, Meg. It's bad." Odette lowered her voice and gently reprimanded the dog. The whimpering sounds momentarily subsided, and Marguerite wagged her tail in excitement. Suddenly, laughter filled the room, catching her attention. Bastian's chuckle rang out as he casually flipped through the documents. A warm and genuine smile graced his face, replacing his previously stern expression. Summoning her courage, Odette rose to her feet, holding Marguerite close. Step by step, she approached Bastian's desk, her heart pounding with anticipation. "Bastian, Marguerite wants to apologize to you," Odette said. Bastian lifted his head, his gaze meeting hers, pushing her to quickly offer a feeble excuse. "Marguerite likes you. It seems your dog has different thoughts." "She's just a bit shy," Odette replied, finding herself with no other option but to become bolder. Ladies often become bashful in the presence of gentlemen they like. Amidst her own absurd reasoning, the sound of Marguerite's growling, teeth bared, seeped into the room. Bastian, silently observing the scene, suddenly erupted into hearty laughter. With each step, Odette drew closer. Yet, Bastian remained unfazed. She approached close enough to read the writing on the documents spread out on the desk. Bastian still did not budge. With a smile of relief, Odette softly stroked Marguerite as the dog continued to emit soft growls. The man's lack of vigilance was a fortunate turn of events.